Dyer wave
3.
Our anthropology is not derived by human psychology or, empirical data from MIT or something like this. It's derived from the revealed aspect of what we see in Christology. And so there's no real way to diagnose man's problem and to understand man and man's anthropology, as I said, without the right theology. Logos is the...
Oh yeah, baby. Oh yeah. We done started this off right. Better get your house in order, baby. That's how we bring it. We done started the day off right with a $333 super chat. Wow. It's been a long time since we got a super chat that fat, but thank you so much to Diet Soda Light. I'm going to have to hit replay on that. Look at that. Zang. Lots of dollars. Time to retire to my island on Little St. James. I'm going to retire to my island out on Little St. James. He says, for $333, you were instrumental in my family's journey to Orthodoxy. Oh, that's great to hear, man. Awesome. My son was baptized and my wife and I were chrismated in November. I was Orthodox. It was Orthodoxy that broke me out of my naive materialist framework. Awesome. Well, I think that will probably be relevant for today's discussion because hopefully I'm not muted. Good. Right. So relevant to today's discussion because we have, one of the premier kind of materialist, modern, new atheist figureheads Old Dickie Dawkins. Old Dickie Dawkins. Well, old Dickie Dawkins, he was right about now promoting that materialism mythology. Right about that time, I don't even know. I don't know where I was going with that. Just an old prospector. I don't know. An old coot, basically. Right about that time, old Dickie Dawkins was promoting his radical materialism. It was a form of reductionism we ain't seen in these parts in high times. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. I don't know. You're asking for the rationale for that random voice. I don't know. Sometimes the old prospector, the old coot just comes out. Surprised I didn't come on the stream wearing a onesie, stained prospector coot pajama with the little butt patch for the outhouse. But he says, thank you for this work. Shout out to Theosis Pilgrim and Orthodox Pilgrim. Yeah, shout out to our bros, Theosis Pilgrim, Orthodox Pilgrim. Long time hype-based men coming out of that Discord, coming out of that YouTube scene. We love those guys. We love the work Orthodox Pilgrim does. Shout out to our boy. Yeah, boy. Yeah, boy. That was Flavor Flav when he got kicked in the testicles, apparently. So I don't know why it was so high pitched, but if you did ever kick Flavor Flav in the testicles, hey, do you think Flavor Flav has ever been to Flavor Town with Guy Ferrari, or whatever his name is? They got a Flavor Town in Nashville. I might have to go check it out. I don't know why. But anything, I think just because of Guy Fieri memes, basically. All right, so today we're going to do the much requested Richard Dawkins, John Lennox debate. I've never seen this debate. I've only heard many people say, well, when are you gonna do this? So, okay, I'll do it. Fine. You keep bugging me, I'll do it. But by the way, just bugging me is not actually always going to get me to do stuff. So if you keep requesting me to debate the same goobers, it will not work, I guarantee you. So don't waste your time and my time with certain things. But this one I was willing to cave on. If you would hit like and share, welcome everybody. This is Hootie and the Blowfish Commentary Hour, where we will be dissecting the symbolism in every Hootie and the Blowfish video. There's a lot of esoteric, satanic, occult imagery, literally in every single Hootie. It's like a black mass every time Hootie is on. She went in the back to get high. I sat on the couch and cried and felt sorry for myself. Let her cry as a tear rolled down her way. Yeah, I know, it doesn't make any sense. Stop looking for things to make sense. But my guess is that just as my random channeling and impressions are not making any sense today, Rich Dawkins will not make sense today. So that's an omen, a foreshadowing. Dickie Dawkins is going to make about as much sense as decoding the esoteric symbolism in Hootie and the Blowfish videos. It's going to make that much sense. That's my prediction. People always say, why are you always snorting, dude? Are you snorting the coke? Are you snorting the coca plant in your room before your live streams? I wish that it was something that cool. I wish I could say I'm a Panamanian drug lord on the side. But actually, it's just spurg allergies. It's because I'm in a room full of dusty books. And because the frickin' trees are at war with me, such as the juniper, allied with Pollen Boy out of Native American mythology to F me up. That's why. I know you're all looking for really sexy, scandalous meanings for my snorting and my sneezing and my rubbing my face all the time. And you want me to be a Panamanian. I want to be a Panamanian drug lord. I want to wear Panama Jack hats. I want to wear Tony Montana outfits. But I'm not. I wasn't made for that. I'm made to sit here and dissect the debates for you fellow Spurs. That was our destiny. That was our predestination. We were destined. Fate. The three fates, them three mean bitches. They destined us for this. Hootie and the Blowfish, Hootie and the Blowfish, and Richard Dawkins. That's what we're destined for. Why are you trying to make meanings out of that? Why are you trying to find coherent explanations out of this nonsense? Stop. Just give up, dude. Just enjoy the ride, man. Let's get into it. Dickie Dawkins, little Dickie Dawkins. Little Dickie Dawkins, little Dickie Dawkins. Trying to run up on my boy, John Lennox. All right, I don't know. Thought maybe I could freestyle out of that, but nothing came to me. As you know, I've not heard the debate. I have no idea where it goes. Somebody said that John Lennox, who looks like a Pillsbury Doughboy, is like a Anglican or something. I don't know. And Richard Vampins. Richard Vampins is like a dog. Richard Dawkins is a vampire. I like Richard Vampins is a Dawkins as a vampire, right? And you know it gets increasingly more fake and gray if you add the VAMPYRE on it. Vampire. I am a vampire. We're talking like Anne Rice level, Brad Pitt and George Clooney level fake and gray, right? When we get that vampire, PYRE on the end, vampire, Richie Dawkins. Let's go with it. Let's roll.
From Professor Dawkins' book, and then give him an opportunity.
All right, we got
to elaborate.
Extremely nerdy moderator. Can you guys hear this?
Lennox
Okay.
An opportunity to respond. Each of those exchanges should be.
Somebody
about
needs to tell
5
John
minutes,
Lennox about the carnivore
per
diet,
side.
bro.
And then what is not reflected
there just ain't no excuse
in
for
your
that.
program is that each of our debaters.
I mean, bro, do you just eat honey buns? Like, why? Is that what British people eat? We'll have to ask Lewis. Do you guys just eat honey buns and shits and bangers or whatever you guys eat over there? I mean, we ate one time when I was at Milton Keynes at that hotel, which was a really nice estate out in the country. And they were cooking up like shits and bangers or squabbies and mash, or I don't even know what all the crazy food they come up with, right? But they don't know. They just don't get food over there, man. They don't know what is supposed to be going on, and they just kind of like, let's put this with this. Let's put bread with more bread, and then cook the bread with more bread. And it's like, man, you guys, that's why the English boys is looking like Pillsbury Doughboy, looking like Bibendum. You know who Bibendum is? I had no idea that was his name. The Michelin Man. Bibendum. That's a dumbass name too, by the way. But still, John Lennox, man, you're going to have to... I don't know. Them English people got to get their diet straight. That's all I'm saying. I don't know if it's Annie Lennox up in here. I don't know. That didn't make any sense. I wanted to do something with Lennox, but I couldn't think of anything. So, I don't know. All right, let's roll with it.
We'll finish the program with final statements, with concluding remarks.
Yeah. We know.
We will start that with Dr. Lennox, and then we will turn to Professor
Okay,
Dawkins.
thank you. Yeah, we know how debates work.
Professor Dawkins.
Come on.
Tonight,
you guys hear me okay?
we will
Does it sound
have
all right?
The first and the
It must be
last
okay, because if the
supposed
sound is
interest
even
of
remotely
Christian
off,
charity.
7,000 people will bitch in the comments for 70 minutes straight. 70 people bitch for 70 minutes
Professor
straight.
Dawkins, could you
So the
begin
sound
our
must be
discussion
okay.
with an autobiographical statement? Tell us something about yourself and about the book.
This dude out here, that dude out here trying to do people's taxes. He's out there trying to do their CPA work. They're up there trying to debate. He's like,
Have you written off your travel expenses to this debate? Actually, you could probably write off your travel expenses. I also have an evangelical tax business and a CPA on the side. If anybody's interested in the audience, I'd be happy to do your taxes after this debate.
uh-oh, here we go.
I
Lord Vampire himself.
Lord Vampire.
was born in Africa. I'm a child of...
Out of Africa theory. That's where it comes from. Do you know it comes from the fact that Dickie Dawkins was born out of Africa?
What was in those days the British Empire, descended from a long line of khaki shorts-wearing, hairy-kneed, brown-shoed colonial officers.
What? Did you think that had rhetorical flair, like to talk about the
khaki shorts, the swirly mustached, the pipe swilling, port swilling, pipe smoking brigadiers of the British Empire?
Had every opportunity to become a naturalist because Africa, as you know, is a wonderful place to be a naturalist. Unfortunately, that's not the way it was. I never was much of a naturalist, much to my father's disappointment, I suspect. He was a very good naturalist.
Tell me a story without telling me a story, Rich.
Suppose that's a preamble to saying that my interest in the science of biology, which is what I specialize in,
Little Richard.
came more from an interest in fundamental questions than from a love of watching birds or insects or pressing flowers.
Or eating raw children.
I know you're all waiting for that, right? Every time we do a little Dickie debate, you guys want me to do that, right? You want the vampire hiss. So there you go. Let's just get it out of the way at the beginning, right?
To know why we're all here. What is the meaning of life? Why does the universe exist? Why does life exist? That's what drew me.
Yes. Well, I'm very interested to hear on a naturalist account what the meaning of anything is. But let's see where this goes. Now, again, I'm told that I'm not positive, but Lennox is some sort of Anglican. So, and he's a mathematician. So at least we're going to get one interesting angle on these sorts of debates that we typically don't get. We did get a little bit of transcendental argumentation when your boy JBP debated Matt Dillahunty, and he almost kind of went tag a little bit. And then we did get tag with, remember, we were pleasantly surprised when we got tag out of Dinesh D'Souza. I didn't expect that. But that ended up being a pretty good debate. So let's see where Lennox goes.
My parents left Africa when I was about 8, and I came with them.
I ate the brains down in Africa. I sucked the blood out of all the children. I licked the brains down in Africa.
Yeah, somebody wanted a Dickie Dawkins version of Toto. So since we already got like $400 in super chats, I'll do it for you.
I was sent to boarding school in England.
Yeah, we don't need your background, dude. We don't need your origin story. We know you're a villain. We don't need the villain's origin story. We already know this. Come on now.
Give a kind of religious background, since we are talking about religion tonight.
He probably comes out of the Church of England is probably who created this goblin. So, I mean, what does that say for the Church of England?
A harmless Anglican upbringing.
What did I
could
say?
Never claim that I had religion.
What did I say?
Harmless Anglican upbringing, except when they put me in the rituals and abused me.
And thrust down my throat in the way it might have been.
My Dawkins impression suddenly turns into Gollum at one point, right?
My precious.
Anglicanism, as you know, is a very civilized version of Christianity.
Civilized version of Christianity? It's a church started by a king that wanted a divorce and now headed by a queen. I mean, very civilized. Yeah, totally nothing to do with like first 1,000 years of Christianity, but you know, whatever.
And smells, and no creationist.
Richard, we don't need you to recount your origin story. Just get into the arguments, dude. And so I think he thinks that a lot of the atheists are always so like narcissistic that they typically will equate their reportage, biographical details with argumentation. And they'll say things like, I never found it convincing. It never seemed convincing to me. And these are typical informal fallacies that we see all the time, right? Your psychological reporting is not an argument. Your incredulity, that's the fallacy of incredulity. The fact that you don't find it convincing is not an argument. And we see this all the time. Now, he may not be going there. He may just be trying to give some rhetorical, flair to his origin story as the story's villain or whatever. But oftentimes you will notice people doing the reporting of biographical details as if that means anything to do with the justification of an argument. And I just reread Father Deacon's paper on Quine, Naturalized Epistemology. Since we covered Quine this last week, I reread the two dogmas and did the live stream on Quine. And I was reminded how, yes, in Father Deacon's paper, he notes this as well, because Quine ends up saying, since empiricists can't justify doing science, he says, we'll just make it a situation where we're just reporting events. But reporting events is not equivalent to justification. And that's the point here, is that falling into biographical details and telling a story does not amount to an argument or justification.
I was confirmed into the Church of England, and at the time I sincerely believed it. I had a brief period of doubt at the age of about 9.
Well, it's interesting that he says that he found Church of England Anglican theology palatable because it didn't teach creation. So, maybe people are making the connection here that when the church abandons creation, they abandon basically the central teaching of redemption. Because if Adam wasn't Adam historically, if the fall didn't happen as it happened in the description of Genesis, then Christ isn't the second Adam. And Christ doesn't renew and restore and recapitulate human nature, as Romans 8 says. You see, Romans 8 connects the cosmic scope of Christ's redemption to the cosmic scope of Adam's fall. So when you dispense with Genesis, right, the rest of the stuff doesn't make sense. And that's basically what Dickie Dawkins is saying.
About 3 years before my confirmation, this doubt was caused by the realization that there are lots of different religions in the world, and I recognized that it was an accident of my birth, that I happened to have been born into the Christian faith, and I recognized instantly that had I been born in, say, Afghanistan or born in India, I would have believed very different things. And that quite rightly shook my faith in the particular religion that I'd been brought up in. Weirdly, and I now don't understand why.
I hear a lot of atheists bring this up. I'm not sure what this is supposed to convey. They'll often make this argument that, well, you were born in that religion and that's why you believe it, and I was born in this other religion and that's why I believe it, and I just realized that we believe what we're born into, and so it's just an accident. Okay, but again, this has nothing to do with the truth or falsity of the religion, right? Because the religions are going to, in different ways, give an account for the people that are born outside the religion. So being born in or out of a religion has nothing to do with the truth or falsity of this or that position. But they like to bring this up a lot. I don't really know why, and I think they think that it's a clever, sophisticated, epistemically privileged view. Like, oh, I was born into that, and then I saw that people believe what they're born into, as if this is some sort of sophisticated, higher vantage point. But everybody believes what they're born into, and people change their mind all the time. So this really has nothing to do with the truth or falsity of this position or that position. It's kind of an irrelevant biographical detail that oftentimes atheists mistake for some kind of insider argument.
I seem to have lost.
They do this too when they say, the religions are all fighting with each other, man. We've been dealing with religions fighting each other for thousands of years. Like, as if because there wouldn't be fights if the people weren't religious. I mean, like, people fight over all kinds of things. And so the idea that if we eradicate this, then we'll, have peace, it's just silly, right? It's like really naive level argumentation that just functions more like rhetoric than any kind of argument, than actual argument.
Doubts when I was about 13, and I was confirmed into the Church of England. I went to Oxford after having lost my faith for good at the age of about 15 or 16.
Well, if I was raised in the Church of England, I'd lose my faith too. I mean, so we'll give Richard a point here for seeing the absurdity of the Church of England.
That was because I discovered Darwinism. I recognized that there was no good reason to believe in any kind of supernatural creator. And my final vestige, last vestige of religious faith disappeared when I finally understood the Darwinian explanation for life.
So Darwinism, as you notice here, will function as an alternate worldview. So even though Richard, I'm sure in his mind, sees the Darwinian thesis as a purely scientific view, what we'll realize actually is that science quite often verges out of the domain of actual science, the limitations of science, into philosophy. And that was actually one of the things that Quine's paper showed, right? Quine's paper showed that one of the dogmas of empiricism was the analytic synthetic distinction, and the attempt to try to reduce philosophy to doing the same thing as science or natural science in some way, or to parse philosophy out as only dealing with the analytic truths. It doesn't work. That rigid sort of classification structure breaks down, because at times the scientism proponents will be verging over into actually all the time, they'll be using logic and they'll be using principles that are not under the immediate purview of science or the scientific method. Likewise, people doing scientific disciplines, or doing a priori research into definitions or analytic truths or pure maths or whatever, they will also be verging over into the domains of sense data and the synthetic truths. And again, that's a key point in the Quine paper. And really the point of that is just to say that empiricism as a foundationalist enterprise is done with, and it's never been saved since the time of David Hume. Okay, we just went through the Two Dogmas paper by Quine, and that's why I'm re-emphasizing this, is because you'll notice that the people like Dawkins, these kinds of people, they're operating as if philosophy, science is still in the period of the 1700s. It's like they've never looked at anything beyond whatever happened in the 1700s. And the more sophisticated they get, that is the sort of atheist, materialist crowd, when it gets into questions of justification and empiricism, they eventually realize, oh, actually, this is all smoke and mirrors, right? There is no justification for what we're doing. And that's the admission of Quine, right? I'm not saying Quine is a believer. So somebody was criticizing me as if I was saying Quine was defending theism. Of course he's not defending theism. The whole point of Father Deacon's paper is that Quine's pragmatic solution is also a failure. It's just illustrating the failures of unbelieving academia and unbelieving system building. It doesn't work. It leads to dead ends. Atheism, materialism, scientism. Dead ends. And the point is that many in academia are aware of this in philosophy, okay? Obviously not in the biological department, the biology, the life sciences. They don't care about that. They don't care about the philosophical questions is the point. And one reason they don't care is that this has been surrendered, right? Science, as Quine in the Humean tradition and many others have said, is not in the business of justification, and it can't justify. We've given up on that. And nobody has sufficiently answered this question since Hume raised it. And it will never be solved because of the logic inherent within the foundationalist enterprise itself.
I went to Oxford. I got a doctorate at Oxford eventually. I went to the University of California at Berkeley as a very young assistant professor, teaching, in those days, animal behavior. I then went back to Oxford after about 2 years at Berkeley. And,
okay, we don't need your whole CV, dude. Get to your arguments.
My career as a student of animal behavior.
Imagine if I got up there and I was like,
And when I was 19, I began to read Greg Bunton, and then at age 20, I read the works of Cornelius Van Til.
everybody be like, come on, dude. Come on.
About 1975,
You don't have to read your CV.
There was a general strike.
Doesn't everybody know who he is anyway? I mean, like, why is he reading his CV as his introductory argument?
Britain, and there was no electric power. I couldn't do my research, and so I thought I would write a book. And I started to write a book, which eventually became my first book, The Selfish Gene. However, unfortunately, the electric power came on again, and so I shelved the first 2 chapters of the book that I'd already written, put them in a drawer, and forgot about them. until about 3 years later in 1975, when I got a sabbatical leave and resumed writing.
The mystical electricity situation, like what was the point of that? I mean, I'm totally at a loss as to what the point of this was. That he just forgot the first 2 chapters of that book. And this is important. See, for the atheists, like the details of their life like this, like, could you imagine the ego in this dude? Like he probably thinks that he's like the most brilliant man in the world, right? So like the fact that he forgot the 2 chapters to this book that he was doing in the 70s and then pulled it out of a drawer, that's like a momentous event, right? For all of human history. Like we're all hanging on what's going on in Richard Dawkins' drawers, right?
The selfish gene. Since then, I've written...
I know some of you women out there are hanging on what's going on in Dickie Dawkins' drawers right now, if you get what I mean.
8 more books, Extended Phenotype, The Blind Watchmaker, River Out of Eden,
we know you have a lot of books,
Climbing
dude.
Mount Improbable, Unweaving the Rainbow, A Devil's Chaplain, The Ancestors'
Read all.
Tale,
Tell us
and
your
most
whole
recently,
CV, please.
The God Delusion.
Read
which
us
is
your
the
undergraduate
subject
paper.
of
Can you
tonight.
tell us all the undergraduate papers you wrote too, please? I'm really curious as to what you wrote in English 101. What did you write on in your comp classes?
Debate. I regard it as an enormous privilege to be alive, and I regard it as a privilege to be alive, especially at the end of the 20th century, beginning of the 21st century.
What a
Privilege
blowhard,
to be
dude.
a scientist, and therefore to be in a position to understand something of the mystery of existence, why we exist.
Do atheists know anything about argumentation? I'm still mystified. Like, these pop atheists are the worst. The only way that these guys could even have an audience and a name is by being propped up intentionally by the system. I'm convinced of that, because this is just, it's all rhetoric and propaganda, especially with Sam Harris. Remember that? It was like, he's the king of emotional appeals and little to no argumentation. But, that's the sad fact of what gets the masses' attention, right? So unfortunately, a lot of people are going to be listening to this. He's got a British voice. He's smart. He must be smart. Listen to his British voice, right? They're going to be thinking this. That's probably what convinces most people, right? Because most people don't even know what an argument is. They fall for the emotional appeals, the sort of rhetoric, the biographical details, as if that's an argument, right?
I think that religious explanations, although they may have been satisfying for many centuries, are now superseded and outdated. I think, moreover, that they're petty and parochial, and that the understanding that we can get from science...
This is a kind of genetic fallacy where just because something arises out of a tradition, it doesn't follow that it's restricted to or encapsulated only in that tradition. And that seems to be like what his point was earlier about growing up as an Anglican and realizing that if I'd been born in another religion, I would have thought that. So the assumption there is that we need a more universalized explanation, because anything from a religious tradition is limited to that tradition. But of course, many religious traditions make universal claims. So again, that's a basic genetic fallacy. I mean, the origin of an argument has nothing to do with the truth or falsity or validity of the argument. So again, notice that probably 80% of the people in that audience think this is a good argument.
Of all those deep questions that religion once aspired to explain, are now better, more grandly, more in a more beautiful and elegant fashion explained by science.
Of course, science actually doesn't explain many of the things that science itself uses and is based on. Now, I don't know if John Lennox will go in that direction. That's the direction I would go in. And that's what I was hinting at with the point about Quine, or the dogmas of empiricism, right? Science isn't an empiricist enterprise. It's based on empirical sense data. That's 99.9% of the scientism empiricists or scientism materials proponents in the world are empiricists. 99.9%. And some smug smart ass is always going to say,
You could be an idealist and believe in empirical sense it appears.
yeah, I know that, dude. How many people follow George Barkley today? None. Okay, like one dude somewhere in the world, maybe. One professor. So get out of here with this, dude. Get out of here. I know that, but 99.9% of the people in the world that are of his ilk are not idealists. Okay, they believe in raw matter, sense data. That's it. That's all you got. And this is such an easily refutable, self-refuting, easily debunkable, reductio to the absurdum level argument and position that it's kind of hilarious that God makes the wisdom of the wise of this world foolishness.
Dr. Lennox?
That was his opening statement. Like, I'm sitting here like waiting, like, okay, so he's taking like 10 minutes to talk about like his story. There was no argument. Not one argument in Lil Dicky's opening statement. I'm kind of baffled here because it seems like we covered a Dawkins. Was it William Lane Craig? We covered a Dawkins debate before. I forget who he was debating, but it seemed like there was at least some arguments. I mean, was I making too many dumb jokes that I just missed the arguments in there? Or was there literally no argument in that? I'm kind of baffled right here, right? So I hope he calls him out on this. I'd be like, if I was John Lennox, I'd be like, well, thank you for your origin story, Dr. Evil, but where was an argument in any of that tale? Like you're over here telling like stories and tales of your background, no arguments, right? So that's great that you believe that Christianity is superstition. We probably already knew that, given who you are, your zillion books that you read, your CV, and your opening statement. And the fact that you're here to defend atheism, I think we could all surmise that you don't accept Christianity. Okay? So why did you give us a 7-minute origin story to tell us that you don't accept Christianity because you think it's super? I mean, I can't believe the stupidity of the atheists that 9 out of 10 times we deal with. I mean, they are so stupid. Like that guy that did that video, Sir Suck, or whatever his name was, Sir something. And the atheist commenting underneath the Matt Dillahunty debate. And literally none of them even know that a transcendental argument, even if you disagree, it's a valid form of argumentation. Like, it's not even really in question, okay? I mean, let's make this point here, because I was reading through those comments the other day, just reminded of the mind-numbing stupidity of these people. Like, no idea. Where's your logic when you're going to make argument? Let's look at this. So the structure of a transcendental argument is very simple. Can we see that? X is the necessary condition of Y. Y, therefore X. Now, granted, I know that no atheist is going to accept that when I plug in God or the preconditions or anything like that. But the structure of the argument is not, my argument is God exists, therefore God exists. Okay, do you see that anywhere in that? Did I ever say, I know God exists because God exists. I presuppose God, therefore God exists. Do you see that in it? Is that the same as this? No, it's not. This is, there's nothing, I mean, it should be self-evident in a way. I don't believe in self-evident truth, but in a limited sense, right? It should be obvious to any reasonable person that this is not a fallacy. If X is a necessary condition of Y, and if Y is the case, then clearly, by necessity, X is the case. It's very simple. Okay, it's not rocket science. I know people get confused over transcendental arguments. They think this is some wild, obtuse, out there thing. It's actually really simple. What's Father Deacon's analogy he always makes? Cake. right? What are the necessary conditions of having a cake? Flour, eggs, sugar, icing. Okay? I have a cake. If I have a cake, then by necessity, I have the necessary conditions of cake. Flour, icing, eggs, milk, whatever. I don't know. Whatever makes a cake. I don't know. I don't need that soy Pillsbury Doughboy diet that old John Lennox is over there eating. Okay? I eat the carnivore diet. But if I did eat cakes, then by necessity, the cake would include the necessary elements of cake to have cakeness, namely flour, eggs, milk, sugar, etc., etc., etc. To quote Bernardo from West Side Story. So, do you guys see this? Because I just want a little minute to rant there about the bottom of the barrel IQ stuff going on in the atheist comment sections. Because there's probably at least 400 or 500 atheists in Matt Dillahunty's comment section on our debate and underneath my debate on my channel with him. They're literally saying, this guy thinks that saying God exists is the argument for God's existence. And they literally think that saying a transcendental argument is word salad. Okay, this is not word salad. This is very simple. So we're dealing with severely mentally incapacitated individuals, right? That's what we're dealing with here. And ultimately, remember, atheism isn't primarily an intellectual problem. Atheism is a spiritual problem, as many of the elders and fathers and saints say.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. Each one of us has a biography and a world.
I think the evangelicals who set this up, they were like,
Well, we're going to have to get somebody with just as much of a British voice to convince the people that he's as smart as Dawkins.
so they were searching far and wide for a
stodgy British chap.
Our set of answers to the big questions that life throws at us. And so a little about my biography. I'm married to Sally. We have 3 children and 4 grandchildren.
Well, hopefully he won't spend his whole opening statement giving his biography origin story, right? Surely he's going to be smart enough. I mean, if he's a math guy, I mean, he'll probably be smart enough to realize that, like, first thing I would say is, Richard, you didn't make any arguments. You talk for 7-10 minutes and no arguments? Come on, dude.
I work now in the University of Oxford as a mathematician and as a philosopher of science. I was born in the middle of the last century.
Now, this is an interesting turn of events. This is the first time in all of these debates we've had somebody who knows the discipline of the philosophy of science. And you guys have heard me talk quite a bit about philosophy of science. I had many classes on this, wrote many papers on this. My first debate with a professor was my professor of philosophy of science, who was a rabid materialist atheist. So I love the questions of philosophy of science because they're the best questions to ask the scientism, materialist, atheist proponents. Because 99.9% of them don't know anything about the philosophy of science. So they don't even know the questions of this discipline. And that's typically why they will say, avoid philosophy. Please stop harassing us. Please stop asking us these questions. We can't answer those. And by the way, they're a waste of time, and don't ask those questions.
In a country with a tragic reputation for sectarian violence, Northern Ireland. My parents were Christian, but they were not sectarian. In the book, The God Delusion, Richard, you say that religion teaches us that it is a virtue to be satisfied with not understanding. Well, whatever other religion this may apply to, it certainly did not apply to the Christianity my parents taught me from.
Well, that's an odd argument. And And we'll see that typically atheists like to classify everybody in the religious camp or in the Christian camp as the worst of those people. Now, you might say, well, you're going to be doing the no true Scotsman fallacy. No, I'm not saying that it's no true Scotsman. What I'm saying is that this is the fallacy. If you don't know what the fallacy is, it's like a kind of a psyop sleight of hand approach where you basically say that since their position was argued poorly by dude X, right, then everybody who has dude X's position is false and mine is true. But just because dude X poorly argued the position, it does not follow that your contrary position is the case. So it's a non sequitur, and we have to be careful of the fallacy. A lot of times people overlook this one because it's kind of clever. It's a sneaky one. And you can see how it dupes a lot of people. Oh, well, look at this. It's like the low-hanging fruit thing, right? Like, remember when Stefan Molyneux would, for many years, debate the dumbest people on the internet. And this made it look like Stefan's position was unassailable. Yeah, but he was only debating the people who argued the opposing positions the worst, you see. Now, maybe it is the case that the opposing position is false. But the fact that one person poorly argued it does not lead to the conclusion that, therefore, say Stefan's position is correct necessarily, you see.
The Bible. They encouraged me to be intellectually inquisitive because they were like that themselves. Not in spite of their Christian faith, but because of it.
This is a good point to bring up, that, you know, the scientific endeavor itself arises out of Christian history. It arises out of Christian and Orthodox universities. And the presupposition is that the unified verse underneath one God, one creator, the reason that reality is unified and meaningful is because it's created. And that was actually, if you read Newman's book on the idea of a university, that's kind of part of his point in that book. And so that the endeavor of science itself assumes a meaningful universe. And the irony is that all the people that now defend scientism, which is a cult propaganda arm of the establishment, have divested the world of meaning in totality. And so their very endeavor is itself pointless and meaningless.
I owe them an immense debt for setting me free to read everything from Marx and Russell to C.S. Lewis, and developed in those days an interest in the big questions of life. I was very fortunate to get the chance to leave Ireland and go to Cambridge, where I could indulge my passion for mathematics.
Is this the thing that British people do? Like, you tell your origin story in a debate? I guess I'm just not used to this. I'm so used to American debate style matter. Maybe, I don't know. Is this an Oxford, Cambridge style debate where you tell a story? What does that have to do with your position? I don't get it.
And for science in general. And Cambridge not only gave me the opportunity to develop those intellectual pursuits, but it gave me the opportunity to meet many people of other worldviews who did not share my background and my convictions.
Well, I like that he is already using the terminology and the thought patterns of worldviews. So this is another good sign that perhaps, I don't know where it's going to go, but perhaps Lennox is aware of the fact that what's at dispute between the atheist and the theist, or the Christian and the atheist to be more precise, is not this or that fact or this or that piece of data, right? It's worldviews as a whole, because our worldview as a whole informs how we interpret or read any single piece of data. This was the whole point of the debate with Trent, which Trent never got.
As a result, I developed a considerable interest in atheism, an interest which led me subsequently as an Alexander von Humboldt Fellow to study in Germany and then travel very frequently to Eastern Europe during the period of the Cold War. After the fall of communism, I went very often to the academies of science at
Yeah, but why do you do an origin story before the debate? Just weird. I've never heard of this. This is bizarre. But maybe it's because the evangelicals set this up, and evangelicals love
Their testimony. Let me tell you my testimony, brother. I was a radical sinner. I used to smoke tobacco cigarettes. I used to spit in tobacco. And then Jesus saved me one night when I had a car wreck, and I fell out my car on the side of the road, and I thought I was gonna die, and I prayed a sinner's prayer. That's my origin. So that maybe that's why, because evangelicals set this up, right? And they love the origin story, the testimony. Give your testimony, brother.
Universities in Russia to discuss and reason about these things and to see at firsthand the effect of systematic exposure to atheist indoctrination over the preceding 70 years.
So
And
maybe
so
I should skip
too, am
ahead
very privileged to
because
live at this time.
I'm going to skip ahead because Sid just said that he said I was so into my stupid jokes that I didn't hear the evangelical tax man at the beginning say that they wanted to do origin stories. So I'm going to skip origin stories.
Been getting better at it over the centuries in the teeth of opposition from religion, although it has to be admitted that, of course, science grew out of a religious tradition.
I'm surprised he admitted that, but yeah, okay. Maybe that's just too historically factual.
Religion, as the quotation that Judge Pryor read out, teaches us to be satisfied with, was it lack of evidence or lack of...
With not understanding.
with not understanding.
So an odd long pause there. So I guess he asked him, what do you mean that religion teaches you to not understand, when my experience was that I was always taught to question and read everything. So, I mean, that was my experience. So this is maybe, again, there's the characterization that the only expression of religion is the, I don't know, backwoods snake handling church. I mean, that's what, like 20 people in the U.S. total? I mean, come on.
But when you consider the beauty of the world and you wonder how it came to be what it is, you are naturally overwhelmed with a feeling of awe, a feeling of admiration, and you almost feel a desire to worship something. I feel this.
So here we have a psychological explanation of religion. So I'm going to try to turn it up. I don't know. This always happens when these debates pop up and Richard Dawkins speaks. It's too low. So let me try something really quick.
I recognize that other scientists, such as Carl Sagan, feel this.
Is that better?
Einstein felt it.
I've got Dickie up as
All
loud
of
as he'll
us
go.
share a kind of religious reverence for the beauties of the universe, for the complexity of life, for the sheer magnitude of the cosmos, the sheer magnitude of geological time. And it's tempting to translate that.
Notice it just assumes all this, right? The aeons of zillions of years, the aeons of how long it takes rocks to form, which is not actually the case. Many counterexamples which they ignore. It's just assumed, right? Well, we all know that it takes billions of years for the universe to form.
Feeling of awe and worship into a desire to worship some particular thing.
So he's just giving a psychological explanation of the origins, he thinks, of religion. And that's not an argument either, right? So even if it is the case that that's your idea of why people are motivated to believe something, that's not an argument to why the position is true or false. In other words, I might be motivated psychologically or on a personal level to believe something that is completely false or happens to be completely true. So it has nothing to do with the truth or falsity of what I'm believing, you say. There's a great example that Barry Stroud gives of the beans in the jar, right? So if I had a jar full of 1,233 beans, and I just looked at the jar and I said, I firmly believe there's 1,233 beans in that jar. And I believe it because last night in my dream, Lando Calrissian came to me and told me that's how many beans are in that jar. Lando showed up in my dream. He was dressed up like Billy D. Williams in the malt liquor ads, and he said, I've got to tell you, there's 1,233 beans in that jar. And I was like, when I woke up this morning, I was like, I knew there's 1,233 beans in that jar because Lando told me. And then let's say that it turns out, even though I've not counted the beans, there was in fact 1,233 beans in the jar. Did I have good reason to believe that? Or forget Lando. Maybe I just really, really wanted there to be 1,233 beans in the jar. Right? And then it turned out that there were 1,233 beans in the jar. So my psychological motivations and my bad reasoning had nothing to do with the actual number of beans in the jar. Now, yes, it was a coincidence, right? I just happened to get it right. I got the right number of beans in the jar, baby. Let's cook them beans. Let's have some chili right now. Celebrate. But you see that the point is that even though I was right, my motivations for that belief or wanting to be the case were totally irrelevant to the fact of there being 1,233 beans in the jar. So that disproves the point that Dawkins is making, which is that I can disprove a position by looking at the motivations of why people believe or disbelieve things.
A person, an agent, you want to attribute it to a maker, to a creator. What science has now achieved is an emancipation from that impulse to attribute these things to a creator. And it's a major...
Well, the fact that people have discarded that doesn't actually mean that it's true, right? So the fact that a lot of people don't want God any place in their life, in their academia, in their processes of scientific methodology is irrelevant, again, to the truth or falsity. And so this is almost a version of mass appeal fallacy, right? Like, well, we all now know that since most of the scientists in the world don't want God in their project, that it's true. But it doesn't matter if 100% of the scientists agree that it's false. That has nothing to do with whether it's true or false, right? That's a mass appeal fallacy.
Emancipation. Because humans have an almost overwhelming desire to think that they've explained something by...
But, so this doesn't apply in the domain of science. The overwhelming human desire to come up with explanations and make it work doesn't apply to the Darwinian mythos, doesn't apply to the naturalistic philosophy, doesn't apply to the very thing that you're... So my position, he's saying, is exempted from the argument that I'm applying to Christians, even though I just said that this is a feature of all human beings, that we have this hell-bent idea of grand explanations, grand narratives. Oh, you don't think that your worldview is a grand narrative that goes beyond the limitations of immediate empirical sense data? Really?
Attributing it to a maker. We're so used to explaining...
So I'm going to have to apologize. I'm going to have to torture you guys for a minute and let you listen to Lil Dicky for a moment, because I forgot to bring the battery in here, so the charger thing. So I'm going to have to plug the laptop in. So you're going to have to listen to Lil Dicky for a few minutes. I'm sorry.
Things in our own world, like these television cameras, like the lights, like everything that we make, the clothes we wear, the chairs we sit on, everything we see around us is a manufactured object. And so it's so tempting to believe that has been made, that living things, or that the stars or mountains or rivers have all been made by something. It was a supreme achievement of the human intellect to realize that there is a better explanation for these things, that these things can come about by purely natural causes. When science began, the aim to achieve it was there, but we didn't know enough. Nowadays, at the end of the 20th century, beginning of the 21st century, we still don't know everything.
Really?
We've achieved an enormous amount.
I thought we knew everything. What?
Way of understanding. We now understand.
Now, notice that everything that he just said, since it wasn't an argument, I could just flip that around and say the exact same thing for theism, right? I could say, It's a momentous achievement now that we have the transcendental argument, and that now we can dispense with the autonomous philosophy of the past and the superstition of the atheist worldview, and now we're liberated to understand divine conceptualism and the fact that God exists, right? Do you see that nobody would accept me saying that as if it was an argument, right? But that's exactly what he just did, trying to pass that off as an argument.
Essentially, how life came into being. We know that we
now know. This is our new fallacy that Father Deacon and I have discovered. The atheists love this one because it's an appeal to some sort of vague kind of like mass appeal or mass vox populi, voice of the masses fallacy, as if there's this consensus and it's certain by saying, we now know. We now know. And they love to, they do this all the time. It's like, well, who's we? We now know. Who are you talking about? Is this the science council that sits on Mount Olympus that gives the dictates, right? After they've done all their peer-reviewed research? Now, we now know. So the we now know fallacy, it's like a version of either appeal to the masses or appeal to authority fallacy, or no true Scotsman, maybe. It's like, and sometimes the fallacies will kind of be like a combination of two different fallacies. So you could say that's kind of like a 3 different fallacies kind of blended into one.
All cousins of all animals and plants. We know that we're descended.
And look, so for those that don't get it, by the way, let me try to help you out with that. All you have to do to show that something is like a basic informal fallacy is give a defeater. That's it. It's really simple, right? Or I can just make the same argument and just flip it around, right? I mean, imagine if I came on and said, we now know God exists, right? We now know with the latest advances in science that the universe shows evidence of creation. Now, you could probably a lot of people do make that kind of an argument. I don't really make that kind of an argument because I don't think it's the best line of argumentation, right? I mean, there is intelligent design. There's evidence of design everywhere, but how you interpret design is already going to be predetermined by your web of beliefs and your worldview. So you're going to interpret reality as disteleological or teleological, ultimately based on your prior commitments, your presuppositions. So that's why it's not very helpful to just immediately dive into, well, we all know that the world is designed. We all know this now. Who's the we? Says who? I mean, does anybody actually think that there aren't going to be people out there that disagree with the consensus of the we now know? So even if you could get a consensus, which is ridiculous anyway, right? I mean, what's the official body that gives us a consensus, right? Like that guy the other day on the live stream was like, there was a study of the epistemologists, and they don't all agree with Quine. Really, dude? Come on. I mean, how do you know that you've tabulated the right number of the epistemologists? And how do you know the right percentage that gives it the we now know status? 51%? 60%? It's just arbitrary, right? There's people just talking bullshit all the time. Just saying shit, right? That's what they do. And it works because people don't know good and bad arguments. And again, I'm not a logic professor. I think logic is pretty boring. I'm talking about logic class, right? I fell asleep in logic class, man, in college. It was boring. You think I want to draw Venn diagrams, dude? That's so boring. But I passed. I got a good grade in logic somehow. And I don't know if it's just intuitive or what, but I guess I'm decent at debating because it's almost like secondhand to see these fallacies. It's not that difficult, at least not for me. Maybe it's a gift. I don't know. But when you hear arguments and you can just kind of intuitively say, well, that doesn't work. That's a bad argument because here's the defeater. That's all I'm doing. That's all you do. It's pretty simple. And there's a lot of fallacies, but the problem is that, or what makes this easy is that most people make the same 10 fallacies all the time. Every now and then somebody will throw you a loop and it'll be, you know, like a little more of a complex fallacy, right? But most of the time, people are making just the lowest level garbage juice smoothie type arguments that are just not, they're just no good, right? Because education partly is so destroyed. That's a big part of it. People, number one, they're not taught this stuff intentionally. They're not taught this kind of stuff. So, anyway,
from a common ancestor, which might have been something like bacteria. We know the process by which that came about. We don't know the details, but we understand essentially how it came about.
we now know the process by which a bacteria transmuted into a bunch of different species. Really? Come on, dude. Nobody knows that process because there's no observational data of anything like that, right? There is mutations within a species to fit the environment, but nothing anywhere close to one species mutating into something else. And they always pass off the micro level adaptations as if, well, if they just had enough time, then a mouse's fur turning darker and longer would become a rat, would become a monkey, would become a dolphin. If you just give it enough time, dude. Trust me. It's freaking magic, man. Just trust me. Just wait. Have we observed millions of years of this occurring? No, but it would, just trust me. It would. We now know this. See, we now know.
There are still gaps in our understanding. We don't understand how the cosmos came into existence in the first place, but we're working on that.
Just trust us. We don't have all the answers, but if you just have some faith in the scientific process, bruh, we're working on it. I can't believe you just said that. We're working on it. I mean, imagine as a theist if I said, I don't have answers to every area of my theology. There's gaps, which is the case. But if you want an answer to all the theological problems, we're working on it. Could you imagine me saying that? An atheist would be like, oh, got you, dude. We got it, bro. We got it. He screwed up, dude. It's over. Retire. You're done. You're canceled. You're done. Come on, man. Really?
Scientific enterprise is an active seeking out of gaps in our knowledge, seeking out of ignorance so that we can work to plug that ignorance. But religion teaches us to be satisfied with not really understanding every one of these difficult questions that comes up.
But it doesn't, though. That's the point, right? I mean, it gives us a totality paradigm within which science actually makes sense. The problem of induction, right? How do I know the future will be like the past? Well, if the world is designed in a providential way by which God makes sure that the seasons follow one another and that tomorrow will be like the past, then it makes sense why there is the principle of induction, which undergirds all science. If the universe is pure chaos, there's not actually a basis for induction. That's Hume's whole point. I might hope that it's the same, but I don't actually have a reason to believe in the principle of induction, which undergirds all science.
Science says, right, let's roll up our sleeves and work on it. Religion says, oh, God did it.
Yeah, but that's not what theology says, right? Theology makes place for human beings as secondary causal agents, right? We don't just say, oh, God did it, God did it, God did it. God doesn't do everything. Humans do things too, right? So this reducing everything to as if we said that God causes everything and everything is explained by God is a way oversimplified approach to what theology actually says. And it's not true, right?
We don't need to work on it. God did it. It's as simple as that.
But who says this? Have you ever heard anybody in the domain of theology say, we don't need to do anything because God did it. You don't need to understand anything because God did it. I've never heard anybody say this. What is he talking about?
Thrusting.
I would say that's a ad hominem, right? Or that's a straw man, because I literally can't. I'm trying to think of even like the worst apologist or Christian proponent, theist proponent. I can't remember anybody saying something like, don't study anything because God did it.
Force pushing us on to try to understand. Religion stultifies the impulse to understand because religion provides a facile easy, apparent explanation, although as we
So, but he just admitted that science itself comes out of religious universities and religion, and man seeking for explanations via religious, theistic, transcendent causes. But now he's saying that religion stultifies that endeavor and shuts it down. Well, it can't be both. How is it both, right? So at the beginning, so he's contradicting himself, right? He admitted at the beginning that religion gives us science by virtue of questioning big questions and seeking for meaning. Oh, but actually religion shuts down science and is the enemy of science.
see later in the evening, it isn't really an explanation, and it prevents the further work on the problem.
Thank you. Dr. Lennox?
There are two issues here. Faith is blind, science is evidence-based. I do not agree with the first one, but I very much agree with the second one. Some faith is blind. And blind faith can be very dangerous, especially if it's coupled with a blind obedience to an evil authority.
Well, I think this is kind of true, right? I mean, I guess this is another point that should have been addressed, is that Dawkins' argumentation assumes that all theology basically functions like a backwoods snake handling cult, right? Like, you don't ask any questions, you just merely submit to authority. But he, again, had just said that the whole endeavor of science comes out of Christian universities, so it just doesn't make any sense. But this should be addressed, right? That we should not set faith or theology over against the domain of reason. And of course, most Christians, I think, whether Catholic or Orthodox, agree with this basic idea. I would go even further to say that actually reason itself presupposes faith, right? That's the even stronger, that's the nuclear level apologetics that we do based on transcendental argumentation. Again, is the proposition faith is not contradictory to reason true? Yeah, sure. But I will make an even stronger argument that reasoning itself presupposes faith. And even the position of somebody like Dawkins presupposes a kind of faith. Didn't you hear him say, we may not have all the answers, but just trust us, we're working on it. That's what he said. That's a faith-based proposition. That's have faith in science, man. Trust the science. What has the cult of scientism said the last 2 years? Trust the science, bro. Trust the science. Trust the science? That's a faith-based proposition. Come on, man.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to emphasize, is true whether the blind faith is that of religious or secular people.
Yes, thank you. Good point.
But not
Secularism is a religious commitment. Yes, this is so obvious, so true. It's demonstrable. You can philosophically and logically demonstrate this with formal certitude and objectivity. And it's so obvious, it's hilarious, that the atheist will double down and try to act like it's not.
all faith is blind faith, because faith itself carries with it the ideas of belief, trust, commitment, and is therefore only as robust as the evidence for it. Faith in the flying spaghetti monster, much beloved of Richard Dawkins, a delightful idea, is blind because there's no evidence for the flying spaghetti monster. But faith in relativity theory is not blind because there is evidence supporting it. I can't speak authoritatively for other religions, but faith in the Christian sense is not blind. And indeed, I do not know a serious Christian who thinks it is.
Yeah, exactly. That was the point I was saying, is that, well, who is Dawkins responding to? Like, I've never heard anybody making that type of an argument. So that was a mischaracterization, a straw man. Pretty good. I like the direction that Lennox is going in. Let's see if he keeps the heat.
Indeed, as I read it, blind faith in idols and figments of the human imagination, in other words, delusional gods, is roundly condemned in the Bible.
This is an interesting point, right? So if we were committed to superstition, there wouldn't be such a fundamental notion within Christianity to avoid and to reject idolatry, I mean, this is Old Testament, New Testament, right? Consistent Christian theology going all the way back to the Ten Commandments, that you can't idolize or have superstitious fears and approaches to the created order because they're under the divine providence of the Creator. So superstition itself, it presupposes, you could say, some kind of delineation category by which you can, from the outset, say, well, that's superstition, that's not, right? But isn't it interesting that Dawkins' position itself could very easily fall into superstition? You say, wait a minute, what? 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 How could a scientism proponent be superstitious? Oh, where were you the last 2 years? Exactly. Did you notice anybody the last 2 years acting irrational? Acting superstitious? What about believing in the fairy tale that things just popped into being from non-being? They just were. Sounds like a fairy tale to me, brah. Sounds like mythology.
My faith in God and Christ as the Son of God is no delusion. It is rational and evidence-based. Part of the evidence is objective. Some of it comes from science, some comes from history, and some is subjective, coming from experience.
Yeah, I like that too. That's good to bring up. So I think it's either Tabash or Stein asked Bahnsen that question, like, well, what is the basis that you have to believe in the existence of God? And he says, well, I personally believe for many reasons, right? And so he says there is the personal existential things that have happened in my life, providential occurrences. There's also the rational philosophical evidences and argumentation. There's the scientific arguments and evidence. There's the biblical inspiration arguments and evidences. So a lot of things go into why we believe something, right? And a lot of times atheists, I think, are when they ask that kind of question, they're looking for like one little like boiled down, thing to latch onto and to refute, right? But actually the way that all human beings operate when they believe anything is it's a web of beliefs that are all interconnected. So there aren't really these standalone beliefs as if they're just like piecemeal things that are brute facts that stand on their own, as if they're not connected to a bunch of other beliefs that we have, right? So my belief, for example, in my ethical views of the world are intimately necessarily going to be connected to my worldview and its view of God. And for example, I usually parse this out as saying that you can't divorce the good from the true or the bad from the false. So aesthetics, being, ontology are necessarily going to be directly connected to your view of epistemology. Now, modern philosophy divorces all that. I'm well aware of that. But the argument that we always make, of course, is that when you do that, you have a heavy price to pay. If you're going to divorce truth value and normativity and ethics and aesthetics from metaphysics and epistemology, etc., you have a heavy price to pay, such as not being able to argue, right? This is a heavy, heavy price. Don't be trying to come to debate when you've given up any notion of the ought. Because when you debate, the assumption is that I ought to follow your argumentation, that I ought to follow your reasoning. And if you're going to tell me that, no, I ought not follow your reasoning, then thank you. You don't have an argument. Thank you. I've won the debate.
Of course, we do not speak of proof. You only get proof in the strict sense in my own field of mathematics. But
by the way, everyone, if you would, be sure and hit like and share. We're over 500. That's nice for this afternoon little ditty here as we analyze the Dawkins-Lennox debate. This is the one that popped up with the most views. So somebody was saying, this isn't the one you need to analyze. Well, I don't know. So this is the one I assumed everybody watched because it has like over 1 million views. So if this isn't the one that everybody wanted, I'm sorry. But this is interesting so far. And we've seen Lennox is now just beginning to kind of launch into the lack of argumentation that Dawkins has given, really just given sort of his own biographical detailed report, and the fact that he kind of does a straw man and just says, well, you're all superstitious, and science is freeing, and we're free now, and we don't need superstition, so just trust the science, bro.
every other field, including science, we can't speak of proof. We can speak of evidence, of pointers, of being convinced beyond reasonable.
So I don't know where Lennox is going to go with this point, but it's actually a point that we brought up in multiple debates and discussions, which is that, especially if you're critiquing foundationalism and evidentialism, is that there's not really any obvious or self-evident idea of what counts as sufficient proof and sufficient evidence. That's a circular, ad hoc attempt to rescue foundationalism. And that's, again, remember that Dawkins' empiricism is part of the evidentialist foundationalist enterprise. Okay, it's in that domain. So if you're going to go with that, then you're going to have you have a tall order, right? You're going to have to give an account for your foundational beliefs, your foundational maxims, your self-evident, your doxastic basicality, and they cannot do that. And that was the whole point of going from Hume all the way up to Quine, and the two dogmas, is to point out that there is no self-evident truths that we can point to in a foundationalist sense for the empiricist to start with in his system. And we looked at Quine's list of things, and they all end up being circular, right? Well, what is analyticity? Analyticity has to do with meaning. What is meaning? Meaning has to do with definition. What's definition? Definition just means interchangeable words. What are the interchangeable words? Go to the lexicon. What's the lexicon say? It's what's analytic. Circle, right? So it doesn't matter which of this circle the empiricist atheist picks, it's going to be circular. And you say, but Jay, don't you talk about circular argumentation? Yeah, but I'm not a foundationalist. This is a critique of that foundationalist enterprise. Classical empiricist-based science, either strong or weak foundationalism, doesn't matter. To critique that is to say that there's no justification for whatever arbitrary starting point they pick, because any arbitrary starting point requires additional proofs and argumentation which have not been proven. They're just assumed. Well, on what basis am I supposed to pick proposition 1 if proposition 1 in your foundational system relies on other arguments, propositions 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? Oh, well, you see, that one is the one that you start with because it's self-evident. Well, that's begging the question. How do I know that's self-evident? And by the way, it's not self-evident if it relies on these other points and other arguments. Hello, Trent. Hello. Do you get this? It's not very hard. It's a simple point.
I think it's important in this context to emphasize that science is limited, because there seems to me a creeping danger of equating science with rationality.
Yes, exactly. Great point. Great point. The limitations of science do not grant you the ability to make grand narrative worldview claims about the origins of life and meaning and all the stuff that they do all the time, going out of the bounds of the strict limitations of empirical sense data. And they're doing a bait and switch, right? They're like, I only follow the science and the data. I only follow what rationality, logic tells me. And then they make these vast claims that go way beyond sense data. They make claims contradictory to sense data. And they can't even give an account for how sense data is meaningful.
But what is beyond science is not necessarily irrational. Science cannot tell us, for instance, whether a poem, a work of literature, or a work of art or music is good or beautiful. Science can tell us that if you put strychnine into your grandmother's tea, it will kill her. But science cannot tell you whether it's morally right to do so.
This is a good point, just reiterating what we saw last week when we analyzed the Jordan Peterson-Sam Harris conversation about is ought. So I like that Lennox has immediately brought up the is ought problem, that you can never get normative ethical claims or standards by reporting what is the case, right? And that's an argument that Hume brought up a long time ago. The fact that this is the case does not tell you whether it ought to be the case. It's a very simple point. The atheists just constantly ignore it, right? We saw Sam Harris talking in crazy circles, trying to point out that, no, you can get an ought from an is, and it went absolutely nowhere, right? There's a great discussion, too, if you've not seen, I'm not advocating this person and his philosophy, I don't know what he teaches, but there's a 20-minute discussion between Sean Carroll and Sam Harris from 3 years ago on YouTube, and he's enough of a philosopher and knows enough epistemology that he just basically makes Sam Harris look like an idiot in 20 minutes, right? And I'm only saying that because Sam Harris has made no progress in this question from 3 years ago to Jordan Peterson bringing it up to him again the other day. So in the last 3 years, Sam Harris has made zero progress, literally states the exact same garbage nonsense that he said 3 years ago to Sean Carroll, which maybe we'll listen to that in another stream or something. But it's funny. Like it's like, you know, it's not very hard to illustrate the logical problem here, Sam, in 5 different ways to you, and you still can't get it.
The Nobel Prize winner Sir Peter Medawar, who's quite a hero, I think, for both of us, has pointed out that you can easily see the limits of science because it cannot answer the elementary questions of a child. Who am I? What is the purpose of my existence? Where am I going? Now, Richard has just contrasted science and religion, religion being content with not understanding, whereas science is unraveling the understanding of the universe. And I understand and feel the force of that objection very strongly, because sometimes Christians, I admit, have been guilty of a lazy God of the gaps kind of solution. I can't understand it, therefore God did it. And of course, God disappears as the gaps close. But I'd like to point out that there are two kinds of gap, ladies and gentlemen. There are gaps that science closes, and I call those the bad gaps. But there are also gaps that science opens, and we may come to some of those later. But as for the idea itself, Richard referred to the very important fact that science, modern science as we know it, exploded in the 16th and 17th centuries, and it arose out of a theistic background.
Yeah, this was my point, so I'm glad he's catching on to this.
Philosophers of science have studied this and come to the conclusion that's now called Whitehead's thesis, that human beings became scientific because they expected law in nature, and they expected law in nature because they believed in a lawgiver.
Oh, there you go.
I think
that's what I just said. So, yeah, isn't that obvious that the reason that science would even be possible is that we live in a meaningful universe with regularity? Duh.
Important, because it means, far from religion hindering science, it was the driving force behind the rise of science in the first place. And when Isaac Newton, for example, discovered his law of gravity and wrote down the equations of motion, he didn't say, marvelous, I now understand it, I've got a mechanism, therefore I don't need God. In fact, it was the exact opposite. It was because he understood the complexity and sophistication of the mathematical description of the universe that his praise for God was increased.
I think that, you know, people who have a more mathematical bent and that are more abstract in their thinking, they're much more able to grasp, not always, but maybe they're kind of situated to where it's easier for them to get transcendental argumentation. I don't know that that's where Lennox is going, but his thought process in terms of how he's responding to Dawkins is how I would respond, right? These are the thought processes that I had, as you heard before, because as you guys know, I've not heard this debate. I don't know what his arguments are. All I know is that he's a mathematician. And so I think that mathematics is, because it's a higher order of pattern recognition and thinking, they're able to see the domain in which divine conceptualism, the logi, transcendental argumentation, why that's much more obvious or a better approach, or that reality clearly points us to that, right? As opposed to the solid 5 cents data, here in the now, evolution, no meaning over time. You know, this kind of the being trapped in the here and the now, the immediate sense data approach that Dawkins has boxed himself into, you see. So, and that doesn't mean that, math is therefore like self-evident. Math is like better than material existence and we need to be Gnostics and try to become Platonists or whatever. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that being able to make higher order pattern recognition comparisons, classifications, I think, kind of gives people a one-up or a better an upper hand when it comes to arguing and debating these points. They're able to systematize and question even at a more fundamental level than the people that are stuck in this very kind of basic bitch level empiricism.
I would like to suggest, Richard, that somewhere down in this you're making a category mistake because you're confusing mechanism with agency. We have a mechanism, it does X, Y, and Z, therefore there's no need for an agent. I would suggest that the sophistication of the mechanism, and science rejoices in finding such mechanisms, is evidence for the sheer wonder of the creative genius of God.
I think this is true. And if he's going in the direction of pointing out that a worldview that removes agency is dysteleological and meaningless, which I assume that's the direction he's going in, I do like this argument. This is a good argument because if I don't recall off the top of my head, does Dawkins agree with Sam Harris in terms of like determinism? I'm guessing he does. It's been a while since I've looked at Dawkins' worldview, but I'm assuming he believes that we're sort of determined by, naturalistic chemical reactions and processes. So if he's going to go in the direction of forcing Dawkins to deny agency and then give up the notion of free will, then what will then happen is Dawkins will fall into the naturalist / determinist fallacy, which is completely self-refuting.
Our next thesis is that science supports atheism, not Christianity. And on this thesis, Professor Dawkins, I would like to read 2 excerpts from your book.
This is an odd style of debate where each section of the debate is a section out of his book. Maybe that's the only thing Richard Dawkins would agree to. I don't know, but it seems like the debate should be the whole debate on one topic, or else you're not going to get anywhere. People are just terrible at, not only are they terrible at debating, they're terrible at how they set up debates. People set up debates in the stupidest possible ways, and it's just kind of ridiculous.
The first is on page 67. You are quoting your colleague, the Chicago geneticist Jerry Coyne, with approval, and he writes, to scientists like Dawkins and E.O. Wilson, the celebrated Harvard biologist, the real war is between rationalism and superstition. Science.
Okay, sorry, what is rationalism on your atheistic, materialistic, constantly evolving flux worldview? The world is flux and chaos, but now we're supposed to be rationalists. Really? And what does this even mean? The rationalist versus the superstition proponent of religion? Does he not realize that most of the rationalists in history have been religious proponents? Plato, Hegel? What is he even talking about, right? I mean, the scientism crowd uses and throws these terms around like as if we all know what that means. We all know what it means to be reasonable. Really? I mean, reason to David Hume is totally different from reason to Hegel. What are you even talking about? And I want to remind you guys, I sense that we got some people in the audience. Y'all know who I'm talking about because I'm calling you out right there. You, yes, you, right there. That you got a little touch of soy in you. Some of y'all got a little soy in you. That's okay because I'm here to help you with that. And the way that I'm here to help you with that is by telling you that it's time to get on that chalk.com. That's my show sponsor. They're an awesome based company. Maybe there'll be a country of their own one day. Let's move to Chalk over in Czechoslovakia, right? Czechoslovakia. I like that. Y'all need to move out of soy Americana over to Czechoslovakia, right? And when you do that, you're going to be boosting that T, right? Testosterone, shown in studies to boost testosterone. I'm talking about the Tomcat right now, baby. I'm talking about the Tomcat Ali, shown to boost testosterone. Go over to chalk.com right now. Use the promo code J50 They got stacks for men, stacks for women. Maybe you're a lady who wants to think clearer. Maybe you're a lady who wants to get the mineral deficiencies solved in your diet. We know that our diets are mineral deficient. The soils are mineral depleted. And that's where chalk comes in to help with that. That's why you need the daily. You need the Shilajit for mental clarity. You need the ashwagandha. You need the Irish moss. Again, very good for mineral deficiency. Maybe you just want to amp up that energy. You guys are like, Jay, how do you do it? How do you do 5-hour live streams? How do you do this? I do it through chalk, baby. Action 2.0. If I'm wanting some action, some energy, I hype myself up on that. On my day-to-day, what am I doing? I'm doing the daily. At night, if I need more energy at night, what I'm doing the Tonkat Ali. And you can go over to chalk.com, CHOQ.com, CHOQ.com. Put in the promo code J50, JAY50. Bro, 50% off, right? We don't know how long they're going to keep that. Now, it was 60% off, right? And we had a lot of people that took advantage of that last month. It's 50% off. Take advantage of that right now. Support my show. Support that awesome base company that's going to be starting their own country, Czechoslovakia. I will be the emperor. Tristan will be the master of ceremonies underneath me. And I promise you, he will not rap. We will not be subjected to his lame underground rap in Czechoslovakia, because he also has chalk as a supporter. So we appreciate that, but we're not gonna allow any of his lame raps in our principality and under our dominion. So you can be assured of that. But hop on over to chalk.com and make use of that discount. Get that necessary supplementation into your diet. And I don't know, somebody said the other day on Instagram, this dude says don't work out, just take supplements. Never said that. Total nonsense. No idea what you're talking about. No, you do need to work out. You do need to eat a good diet. Stop eating the junk. Stop eating the GMO. Stop eating all the SOY. Fix yourself, boy. Now.
Is but one form of rationalism, while religion is the most common form of superstition. Several pages earlier, on page 59, you write Noma, which is the idea that religion and science do not overlap.
Okay, come on, Taxman.
Non-overlapping
Make your point.
Is popular only because there is no evidence to favor.
Because I'm the taxman. Yeah, I'm the taxman.
Would you care to elaborate?
First, I'd like to respond a little bit to what John said on the previous occasion. I feel happier if we could have a bit more of a dialogue rather than this.
Ooh.
When you say faith is rational and
Dickie trying to change it up. Actually, that would be cool, right? I mean, we always prefer. I don't ever do a public debate, a big one, without the cross-examination. Now, if like Sam Harris or Richard Dawkins said that they would debate me, but they wouldn't do a cross-examination, yeah, I would still do it, right? Of course, that's never going to happen. But what I'm saying is that you need the cross-examination, or else the debates are just freaking boring, dude. It's not even a debate. It's just people reading their papers or something. You need the cross-examination to nail the person. And that's like the most fun part of the debate. And everybody always wants to have these soy debates where nobody gets nailed and everyone's very polite and just states their case. And, oh, we're all friends. No, dude, we want to have some bodies on the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor. Let the bodies hit the floor.
it's based. I mean, if that were true, it wouldn't need to be faith, would it? I mean, if there were evidence for it, why would you need to call it faith? You'd say just evidence. And when you said that we...
What does he think these words mean? It's like he's got his own definition of these words. Like the word faith automatically means nothing to do with proof or evidence. What are you talking about? Who's ever said that? I mean, even in Hebrews 11, faith is related to evidences, strong evidences. Faith is the beginning of knowledge. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge and wisdom. So he's totally... I don't know where this comes out of the Enlightenment, where the Enlightenment philosophers basically set up a fideistic definition. So Richard Dawkins is just assuming that the word faith means fideism. No, it doesn't. Fideism is a heresy, dude. So you're arguing against straw men. Nobody in this domain, your opponent doesn't have this position. You should have figured that out already, that your opponent, I mean, in the last 10 minutes of what he said was the opposite of what you're saying. And now you're going to attribute to him, again, a fideistic position when he just denied being a fideist.
That faith in relativity, in Einstein's theory of relativity, is evidence-based. That, of course, it is. But the evidence is all important. I mean, Einstein's predictions fit in with observed fact and with a whole body of theory.
I feel sorry for people out. I mean, people get duped by the dumbest stuff, right? And the irony is that these people present themselves as the debunkers, right, of superstition. And yet they dupe people. The irony, the great irony. They dupe people with the dumbest shit, right?
Whereas we only need to use the word faith when there isn't any evidence.
I presume you've got faith in your wife. Is there any evidence for that?
Yes,
Which you base it? Yes.
Plenty of evidence. Let's general.
I think that was pretty good. It was a clever rhetorical retort. You have faith in your wife. Is there any evidence? Okay, so I think he's just trying to illustrate that faith isn't mutually exclusive to evidence, which that seems to be a good point.
I said, never mind about my wife. Let's
It's the same with mine, Richard. It's the same with mine.
let's say that in general, how do we know that somebody loves us? Okay. You can use a word faith for that if you like, but it's not the right.
Oh, now that's not the right use of the word faith. No, but it is, because you have an arbitrary definition based on fideism. Everybody in this debate on our side is telling you that we're not fideists, and you're saying, yeah, but it really means fideism.
Word because you know why your wife loves you because of all sorts of little signs, little catches in the voice, little looks in the eye. That's the evidence. That's evidence. That's perfectly good evidence. That's not faith.
Yes, it is.
Well, okay, then we're coming down to pure semantics.
I think
No, you had an arbitrary definition of faith being mutually exclusive to argumentation, and he's just simply showing you that that's not the case.
been influenced too much by Kant, you see.
Yeah, see, Kant was, remember, did you just hear me say that the Enlightenment philosophy was fideism? Faith equals fideism. That's the Kantian view. That's not what it is.
Not explicitly, I have to say. Okay, let's go on.
Yeah, let's go on, because actually I'm looking dumb right here. Exactly.
Which of these statements are we now on?
We're on the second.
It didn't seem to have much connection with the quotes from the God delusion that you
That
read.
actually works well with the first.
Okay, it does. You read a quote from Jerry Coyne about the real war being between supernaturalism and naturalism. The context of that quote was the turf wars, in a sense, in American education between creationism and evolution. And within that context, I have been accused of letting the side down because, as you know, there's a problem with American education that some nutcases are trying to introduce creationism into American schools.
So to have a doctrine of creation is nutcase, but to have a degenerate materialist atheist philosophy, which is totally irrational and superstitious based, because things just out of nothing, that's rational. So notice that the rational for him is just whatever his position is and whatever the majority of science says. I mean, why are we supposed to follow the majority? And who even knows what the majority? So do you see how it's question begging? Well, what is the rational position? It's what science says. Well, how do we know what science says? Well, it's what the scientists report to you. Okay, so is science a God voice from Olympus. There's a council of the scientists, right? The Nicene Council of Science is over there, like giving the dogmatic decrees. Do you see it? And they all operate this way, like it works that way. Now, if I were to go to, let's say that I live in a city with 2 universities, and one university is a Christian theistic university, and they have an engineering department, a life sciences department, mathematics department, and everybody there is a believer, and they're actually producing quality inventions, quality papers, etc. On the other side of town, there's a atheistic, degenerate, secular state university that has all the same departments, and let's say that they're not actually producing very good quality stuff. For the sake of argument, the papers, the inventions, they're all garbage, right? Because they're all woke, maybe. Now, which is the scientific university in my city? On what basis am I supposed to know what the science is telling me when I have 2 different universities with radically different views? One, let's say for the sake of argument, producing good results. The other one, not, quote, superstitious, but actually is superstitious. Like, do you see the point here? For Dawkins, that's the theistic group doesn't count, right? No true Scotsman. They're not true scientists. So it begs, it's a giant question-begging exercise. It's a giant ad hoc exercise. The scientific crowd is the one that promotes scientism, and that's the one that is the true science crowd because they're evidence-based. Who's evidence-based? The scientists. Who are the scientists? The ones that are evidence-based. Like, it's just you constantly get this circle, and it's completely arbitrary. That's, I think, too, why he wanted to move on from that last question, because he was about to get stumped.
Let's move on. Quickly. Let's move on, my precious.
Which is obviously very bad for science, and my scientific colleagues are deeply worried by this and are trying to fight it.
He's deeply worried by people in the Bible Belt that want to introduce creation back in. By the way, the more I think about this, isn't it obvious that all of this stuff from this crowd, they're all out of the Royal Society. They're all working with that establishment, which gave us this horrendous ideology of Darwinism to begin with, as a propaganda tool of the British Empire. And their whole ethos is a satanic Anglo-destructive philosophy. And they promote it to the whole world. And it's completely destructive. And the real power behind this ideology is people like the royals. Now, why do I say that? Because the Darwinian ethos is wrapped up with social Darwinism, and it's wrapped up with Malthusianism, and these totally go together. They arise out of the exact same establishment. Anglican minister Thomas Malthus, together with the other evolutionary proponents who wanted to depopulate the world massively, the same ideology of that British elite, which he represents. He is a goon, a mouth of those people. Do you not see this? Do people not? Is this not obvious? Why is he propped up? He's not even that smart. He can't make basic arguments. He's propped up because he promotes a cultural warfare ideology, a toxic ideology. It's a conspiracy theory. It's not a conspiracy theory. So I did my grad work on this. I know this subject. I know what the philosophy of the British Empire and its elite are. And he's a mouthpiece he's the mouth of Sauron. And it's just so hilarious to me. It's sad, actually. People think that that's what science is. It's a totally wicked, destructive, elite ideology by a bunch of inbred, demonic people. I mean, Prince Andrew, Epstein, that's the real power behind who gives you the ideology that he spouts. And if you don't think the world operates on the basis of elite power, you are severely naive and severely slow boy, and just move on. Go somewhere else, man, because you're not going to get it. If you don't get it by this point, now that Klaus is out there as an arm of these same people, literally to your face telling you this, There's no hope for you. Move on. Just go live your life because you're not going to get anywhere. You're done. You're not going to wake up. There's no hope for you. If you can't get this, when it's in your face, there's books about the Royal Society, how they promoted to the whole world this totally demonic ideology. You see the devastation all around you of this ideology. It's completely destructive and anti-human, anti-natalism. They admit their philosophy, their worldview is anti-human, anti-natalism. They want everyone dead. What does the Duke of Kent say? And I hope to come back as a virus to kill most of the world. Well, can't you mean? Can't you know what I mean? And the interviewer's like, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? Well, can't you guess what I mean? I mean to kill everyone. These people are possessed. They're evil.
And all power to them. They complain that I am not helping matters, that I'm in a sense rocking the boat by saying quite openly that...
the other thing too is I think a lot of people... So if you're raised in evangelicalism, if you're raised in some stupid fundamentalist thing, if you're raised in the papacy and its clown show with Frank, I could see why people would say, oh, religion's dumb, right? Maybe this guy has the answers. And that's, I think, what happens with most people is that they see the stupidity of clown church, and then they look circus church, and then they hear maybe something like this, and, oh, okay, maybe he's got some points. But they don't realize that the same entity that created and destroyed clown church is the same entity and power structure behind him. They work for the same people, quite literally. So what a lot of people can't grasp is that evangelical business church and Richard Dawkins are both dum-dums. Did you ever think of that? Like, see, most people, especially normies, they're caught in this low-level dialectic as if it's a choice between business church, evangelical, Joel Osteen and Papa Frank, or Richard Dawkins, right? That's your options. Choose wisely. What if they're both dum-dums? Did that ever occur to anybody? Maybe both of these people are idiot goobers. And then, I don't know, you could come up with a third option. I don't like Dawkins or Francis. I'm a Gnostic. What if there's three dumb options? Did it ever occur to you that there's three dumb options? Trialectic of idiocy. Everybody is so simplistic in their either or thinking, right? And that's why it's a fallacy. In fact, the either or fallacy is one of the most common fallacies, isn't it? It's either this one or that one. No, not necessarily. Maybe both of those are dumb. It's not always either or. Maybe all three options. Maybe there's three options that are all dumb. There could be four dumb options. Soy face, what?
My understanding of evolution that has led me to atheism. And they point out again quite rightly that if I were called up to in a court of law testifying in favor of evolution and against the teaching of creationism, and the lawyer said, Mr. Dawkins, is it true that evolution has led you to atheism? I should have to say yes. Whereupon he would turn to the jury and say, my case rests. It doesn't do the cause of science any good to unite evolution with...
Why ought I follow the cause of science? I mean, just every sentence this guy makes, do you see how fraught with presuppositions and invalid conclusions and non sequiturs and assumptions that are invalid? Do you see this? We should follow the cause of science. I'm interested in defending the cause of science. Truth, reason. Why should I follow truth and reason? There's no oughts in your view, right? Remember at the very beginning, Lennox actually raised the Izzat question. I don't even think it registered in Dawkins' head. He just blew past it, right? Ought to follow the pattern, the cause of science. What are you even talking about? The cause of science? Maybe I'm just a totally wicked person who wants to use science to destroy everyone. I mean, that's the people you work for. So why should I follow the cause of science? By the way, life's meaningless anyway, so it doesn't matter whether I follow it or not, right? So it's just all arbitrary and totally subjective. And yet at the same time, he's constantly referring to logical conclusions, logical necessity, purpose, meaning, oughts, normativity, over and over and over and over.
Atheism. That was the context of Jerry Coyne's remark. Coyne was saying, okay, if you're concerned only with the narrow political battle of saving American science in the schools, then you should button
saving science. So notice it's like a cult. It's like a religion to them, right? Like the evangelical atheist religion is under attack by the evil fundamentalists who are going to take us back to the Dark Ages. But he just said that the Dark Ages is actually where science emerges from, out of Christianity. But forget that. Why does he need to save science? I mean, if science is this Mount Olympus thing that tells us truth, does it really need Richard Dawkins to save it, right? Or is science actually a modern scientism worldview? AKA, what does he mean, right? Because I use my example of the two universities in the city, right? Which Dawkins would tell us to go to the university that's non-theistic, that's actually producing no results, and worse, because that's what counts as science, versus the university that's actually really good and producing results in the city, my fictional city. Remember, Dawkins is going to tell us to go to the secular one that sucks because that's actual science, right? But now wait a minute. So science now is kind of like a religion. It's a thing that he's an evangelist for, he's an apostle for, that he wants to save. He's like the Athanasius of the science religion, right? And he's going to save us from the superstitious cults and religion proponents. But you see, my point here is just that the more that you listen to these people and watch the way they work and what they do, you see how it is a religious ideology. It's a dogmatic commitment. And twice now in the debate, Lennox has forced Lewis to speak and use that terminology. Well, the first time it was Richard on his own. He said that we don't know all the answers, but trust us, science is working on it. Trust us, science is working on it. That's faith. And then in 10 minutes ago, Lennox said, faith and evidence are not mutually exclusive because you yourself believe on the basis of evidence things that you can't prove. And Dawkins admitted that and said, let's move on. Remember? That was let's move on.
Your lip and stop talking about atheism. If, on the other hand, you think, as Coyne does, that the real war is between supernaturalism and naturalism, then you would say, well, the battle over evolution and creationism is only a skirmish.
This is going to be really funny, too, because if he goes in the domain of trying to defend naturalism, that is a totally contradictory, ridiculous, self-refuting, faith-based worldview that is one of the most dogmatic and fanatical. Far worse even than, I mean, I put the naturalism worldview, I'm not joking, I put the naturalism worldview on the exact same footing as the snake handler church. They're exactly the same to me in status, rationality, etc. I'm trying to think if I had to choose, do I want to be Dawkins or do I want to be in a snake handling church? So they're equal. Literally, they're equal. I don't know.
The war is over something rather more profound. That was the context of that. Noma was the second quotation that you read. That's non-overlapping magisteria. The late Stephen Gould argued that there was no real battle between science and religion because they were about non-overlapping magisteria, different things.
So again, we see this faulty assumption that Lennox has already refuted, that Dawkins just assumes that the word faith is literally equivalent to fideism. And Dawkins was already shown that that isn't the case, but he just marches forward as if that was never discussed or disproven.
Ships that pass in the night, no contact between them. They're about totally different things.
What did we just see in the Two Dogmas of Empiricism essay by Quine? This arbitrary division, as if these domains are completely separate, don't overlap. I know that Quine's paper is not about exactly the same thing, but the point is the same. Really? Can you actually have science without some a priori truths and without some a posteriori truths or claims? No, you can't. It's not science. Science is necessarily going to be involved in both domains. So if that's the case, then this arbitrary argument that they are non-overlapping, which is what undergirds Dawkins' argument and presupposition that faith just is fideism and a leap, nothing, it's irrational, is not true. So his whole argument has already been undercut by Lennox basically just saying, no, faith is not defined as fideism.
I don't think that for a moment. I think that religion really is, in a sense, about science. I think that religious claims about the universe are scientific claims. I suspect that John may agree with me about this. Claims about the universe are scientific claims. A universe with a God would be a very different...
So this is the reductionism that psychologism or materialism ends up in, right? So this actually sounds like Quine as well, right? Where Quine ends up in the position by saying, well, we can't justify our foundationalist, empiricist, evidentialist scientism beliefs. So we're going to give up justification and we're going to just say that we're doing scientific reporting. Epistemology is psychological scientific reporting of facts. That's what he says, right? Again, the best of the philosophers end up in foolishness when they adopt atheism, whether it's Quine or any of them. Certainly, I mean, Dawkins isn't a philosopher, so Quine is way smarter than this dude. But the point is that it doesn't matter because this has already been shown and demonstrated to be not the case. It's very easy to demonstrate this, but these people have no knowledge. It's kind of amazing, really. Like, how do you be a public intellectual and not know these things? It's kind of baffling to me. Well, if you're a public created pop intellectual with a lot of funding and establishment backing, then I can understand it. And that's exactly what this is. Now, we're going to continue with this. However, the scientific processes of nature are telling me that I got to go TT. I got to go to the little girl's room. So I'm going to go TT. I'm going to sit down on the toilet because I sit down to pee. And you're going to have to listen to a little more Richard. So listen to little Dickie while I go TT, and I'll be right back. But I'm going to be listening. Don't worry. I'm going to hear his wonderful, sophisticated British accent soothing me as I take a potty break.
Different kind of universe from a universe without a God. Scientific methods are the appropriate methods, or at least the scientific way of thinking is an appropriate way of thinking for deciding whether we live in this kind of universe with a God or that kind of universe without a God. It becomes even more glaring where you talk about miracles, which, I mean, however much sophisticated theologians may profess their non-belief in miracles, the plain fact is that the ordinary person in the pew, the ordinary unsophisticated churchgoer, believes deeply in miracles, and it's largely miracles that persuade that person into the church in the first place. If there are miracles, they are to be judged as by scientific means. If there was a virgin birth, if somebody was raised from the dead, these are strictly scientific claims. They may be difficult to verify, but as I've said in the book, The God Delusion, if you could imagine, hypothetically, that DNA evidence could be discovered showing that Jesus never had a father, Jesus was born of a virgin, then can you imagine any theologian saying, oh, no, not relevant, separate magisteria, science has no bearing on this case? Of course they wouldn't. Science has every bearing on this case. That's what I have to say about NOMA, and I think I probably run out of my 5 minutes.
Thank you, Professor Dawkins.
Well, I agree with you very much on the NOMA issue, Richard, that science and religion, keeping them separate. Actually, if you read the small print on NOMA, it rather disconcerts you because it says that science deals with reality and religion and everything else, and of course I'm not very happy with that. I certainly agree with you that the modes of logical analysis that science has introduced to you are the right ones. to deal with many of the central claims of Christianity. I would widen it a bit. It's historical science, of course. We're dealing with events in the past. But Christianity is falsifiable in that technical sense. I would very much support that. Now, the thesis here is that science supports atheism, not Christianity. I think atheism undermines science very seriously.
Yeah, exactly. I like where this is going. Good point there. That's what I would argue.
As if you think of the basic assumption that all of us who are scientists have, that is, we believe in the rational intelligibility of the universe. And it's interesting to me that scientists of the eminence of Eugene Wigner and Albert Einstein use the word faith. They cannot imagine a scientist without this faith. Because, of course, they point out that you've got to believe in the rational intelligibility of the universe before you can do any science at all.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was the point at the beginning that, well, if Richard admits that the scientific process and endeavor comes out of the Christian worldview and paradigm based on the idea that the universe is intelligible and is meaningful and ordered and purposeful, then science makes sense. But if science then basically undermines the possibility of science by making the universe non-regular, no principle of induction, no objective meaning, no objective rationality or world, no immaterial, abstract, invariant concepts or rules or laws, then science is impossible. And so what Richard is doing is not actually science. He is a promoter and evangelist for scientism, which is a radical faith-based worldview.
Science doesn't give you that. Now, the interesting thing is this. Suppose we now look at that issue against the background of the two worldviews we're discussing tonight, atheism and theism. Atheism tells you, at least Richard tells us in his book, that since human life has been cobbled together by unguided evolution, it's unlikely that our view of the world is accurate. Quite so.
Yeah, this is funny because at the end of Quine's Two Dogmas, he kind of says something like this, like, well, if you think about it, our worldviews are human constructs. And given the fact that we're the product of pure random chaos and chance and meaninglessness, it's very unlikely that our worldview constructs, our web of beliefs and our system of thought that we use to understand and organize and categorize the world, that it itself has any meaning. Right? It's unlikely. Not only that, it's impossible. It's incoherent. Does that make sense? Okay, so not sure why it would be echoing. It's funny how this thing works. Like, there hasn't been echo the whole time, right? Is it when I went away? I don't know.
And if you are a reductionist, as you must be as a materialist,
is it still echoing? I don't know.
Reducing beliefs to the physics and chemistry of neurological structures, then it raises a very big question, ladies and gentlemen. If in the end my beliefs, my theories, my scientific theories are the results ultimately of the motions of atoms in my brain produced by an unguided, random, mindless process, why should I believe them?
Yeah, exactly. So, as I suspected early on in the debate, when Lennox was trying to kind of set up Dawkins to moving into the naturalist determinist fallacy, that's where he's taking it now. My rational atheist worldview is utterly meaningless as a conceptual entity, given the fact that Dawkins in his book says our rational conceptual schemes are human constructs and irrelevant to explaining the way the world really is. You see how self-refuting and stupid this is? I mean, why would he even put that in the book? It's kind of like, really? You said that and then you write a book as if that isn't the case? I mean, these atheists are so good at self-owning. It's sort of like a special talent they have.
In other words, it's like someone sitting on the branch of a tree cutting off the branch on which they're sitting.
That's from Van Til. That's from, or actually it might be from Wittgenstein. So, exactly. You've heard me say this. And here you have Lennox saying this very thing. So, great points here for Lennox.
It seems to me that, therefore, atheism actually undercuts the scientific endeavor very seriously.
Yes, thank you. exactly the type of argument that I would make and have made and did make. So I haven't even heard John Lennox, but that's exactly where you would hear me go.
In my mind, is a fatal flaw. An argument that purports to derive rationality from irrationality doesn't even rise, in my opinion, to the dignity of being an intelligible delusion. It is logically incoherent. But theism tells us that the reason science is possible, the reason that I can access the universe.
Was there always an echo, or is it just now an echo when I went TT? So it's just weird how this thing will be fine and then suddenly it will be an echo. I wish I could figure out what causes there to suddenly be an echo, given the fact that it appeared to be fine. So the chat's behind, so what you guys are saying is like 30 seconds ago. So is there an echo now? Okay, it's worse now. Maybe if I turn myself down. So the complaint was that their video is too low, but when I turned their video up, now it echoes. It got worse. Dang. Maybe if I
Verse, at least in part through my
is
human
that
intelligence,
if I lower them,
is because the same God who created the universe is ultimately responsible.
it's almost impossible to get
for
this
the
right.
human
I mean, it
mind.
never works. I don't know
So
what the deal
that's the
is.
base level. But when we come up a level now and look at science itself, we have the fine-tuning of the universe, the fact that the basic constants of nature have got to be very accurate in order to have a universe just like this one. Now, I know that some people prefer, that's the word that Sir Martin Rees uses.
Is that better?
An explanation in terms of a multiverse, which actually doesn't, in my opinion, solve the logical problems. But I'm very...
Now, see, but I usually don't have to mute when the video is playing. So it's not all. So was there an echo from the very beginning of this whole thing or in the last 15 minutes? That's what I'm trying to figure out, because I usually don't have to mute. That's the point. But sometimes, for whatever reason, I do have to mute. So it's the microphone picking up what he's saying, but I don't want to sit here and have to mute and unmute every time I talk. And I don't usually have to, but sometimes I do, I guess.
In the verdict of Arno Penzias, who won the Nobel Prize for discovering the microwave background, and he says astronomy leads us to a unique event, a universe which was created out of nothing, one with a very delicate balance needed to provide exactly the right conditions required to permit life, and one which has an underlying
Okay, I'm going to try muting. Tell me if it goes away.
Say supernatural plan, so that physics itself, looking at the constants and the very, very specified numbers they had to have, comes to that kind of conclusion. And incidentally, the Bible gets very easily dismissed, I'm afraid, also in the God delusion. Penzias added, the best data we have concerning the Big Bang are exactly what I would have predicted had I nothing to go on but the 5 books of Moses, the Psalms, and the Bible as a whole. It's interesting, ladies and gentlemen, isn't it, that we only got the idea that the universe had a beginning, evidence for it in the 1960s. It was very exciting. I remember it well. Because for centuries, Europe was dominated by the thinking of Aristotle, which put the earth fixed at the center of the universe, everything rotating about it and everything existing eternally. The fascinating thing is this, that when evidence began to arrive, that there was a finite beginning to space-time, some leading people in the journal Nature, the editor, Maddox, said, this is dangerous. We don't like this because it'll give too much leverage to those who believe in creation. Now, what I find very interesting is this. The Bible is frequently dismissed as being anti-scientific because it makes no predictions. Oh, no, that's incorrect. It makes a brilliant prediction. For centuries, it's been saying there was a beginning. And if scientists had taken that a bit more seriously, they might have discovered evidence for the beginning a lot earlier than they did.
Professor Dawkins.
It's an interesting argument. Kind of an argument from the unknown or silence, but an interesting point. Like, if we had not discarded telos and theism, would we have made more progress? Actually, I think I've made that argument, right, a while back in some talks where I was saying that wouldn't we have done way better if we had assume that the universe has purpose and meaning, which scientists used to do. So yeah, exactly. So I have to turn the thing way up because everybody's complaining that it's too low. But if I turn it up high enough that it's not too low, then it echoes. So it's catch-22, dude. I guess I'll just have to ride the mute button, which is annoying. I hate riding the mute button. It's stupid, but I guess that's what I have to do. So I don't know if I can take much more Dickey. We'll see what Dickey's reply is, but it looks like so far, I mean, we're only halfway, and I mean, Lennox is pretty much demolished Dawkins, who hasn't made any arguments yet. I mean, I'm trying to think. Did he make an argument? I mean, just calling Christianity superstition and the fact that Lennox challenged the presupposition that faith equals fideism and Dawkins just ignored it. I mean, do you want to enter into the debate at hand, or are you going to continue to debate against some other position that isn't your opponent's position? Right?
I understand your desire, in some ways, to respond to Dr. Lennox, but I think that this next topic in the excerpt I'm going to read will allow you to both advance the discussion of the next thesis, which is that
this poor guy. So he's is this guy married? Like, how would this guy ever get a chick, right? I mean, this poor guy. Like, go do somebody's taxes, man. We need somebody else there. Come on.
Design is dead. Otherwise, one must explain who designed the designer.
Come on, man. If you're gonna bring these low IQ designer arguments, I mean, let's. I don't know if I can take much more of this. We're gonna open up, right? This debate's not that long anyway. I think I have it linked. If you want to watch the full debate, go watch the full Dawkins Lennox debate. We're gonna listen to Richard's next reply, and if we don't get an argument after 45 minutes of debate, that'll be about 50. We're gonna have to move on, and we're gonna open up people on Twitter Spaces. The way this works, as you guys know, on the Twitter Space, if you want to make an argument, you want to challenge me, you want to body me, let the bodies hit the floor, let the bodies hit the floor. You want to body me, you can do it. You can have the floor, make whatever argument you want. The only rules are it has to be arguments, it has to be relevant to the topic, theism, etc. We're not going to debate me being a CIA, KGB sorcerer. I already am. I'm the greatest CIA spy, KGB sorcerer in the world. I'm like a quadruple agent. So no need to expose me. You already know I'm a sorcerer. The debate has to be on topic. You can have the floor. Now, you can't beat that, right? Now, everybody's all, I want to debate. He won't debate. He won't debate. Dude, it's open floor right here. What do you mean I won't debate? Anybody could come debate right now. You could have the floor, dude. You could have the floor like a damn janitor on Sunday. Right? You can mop me up. I'll be like that teenage vomit that you as a janitor on Sundays mopping up with that pink stuff. That stinky pink stuff. You can sprinkle it all over me and mop me up. Mop the floor with me, please. Please come mop the floor with me. You can make whatever arguments you want. I'll let you talk as long as you want. Within reason. You can't talk for 2 hours about your stupid channel with 500 views. No followers. We don't care about that. But you can have the floor making arguments all you want. Over on Twitter Spaces. It's right there at the top of my Twitter. Guys, it doesn't work on PC. Everybody asks this question. No, it's not going to work unless you have the app. But if you have the app, it'll work. When you come on, you'll be muted. You have to request to speak. Request to speak. I will give you the floor. And then you can have the floor like a janitor on Sunday. But you got to request to speak. Let's hear Richard's final reply. And then we will open up for questions and debates. And I'll read some more super chats.
I think it'll allow you to advance that well. The quote that I'm going to read, the excerpt, is on page 109. And what you wrote is this. The whole argument turned...
I hope everybody knows that that was just a joke. That wasn't me, okay? I don't know, there's some low IQ people that think that was actually me debating the other day. That was a guy that does an impression. That wasn't me. So they said, do you care if we do this? I said, no, I don't care. You can have a mock debate where a dude impersonates me. I don't care. That wasn't me.
On the familiar question, who made God, which most thinking people discover for themselves. A designer God cannot be used to explain organized complexity, because any God capable of designing anything would have to be complex enough to demand the same kind of explanation in his own right. God presents an infinite regress from which he cannot help us to escape.
You're saying that's hilarious. So the people in the chat thought that was actually me. I mean, that's super dumb, dude. Like, as if I would be making arguments that dumb and that bad. Man, people are just stupid, dude. It's like, what's the point anymore? What's the point? We live in a society. We live in a society, right? There's no debate's done, man. I don't know. We just can't debate anymore. Like, people are so dumb as to think that the goofy, which I think it's funny that there's a guy that was doing an impersonation. I told Ralph, I don't care. You could do that. That sounds funny. I don't care. And people really thought that was me. Man, people are super dumb, dude.
Argument, as I shall show in the next chapter, demonstrates that God, though not technically disprovable, is very, very improbable indeed.
First, I find it deeply unimpressive that the Bible, it can be said to predict the Big Bang. There are only two possibilities. Either the universe began or it's been here forever. Just two possibilities. To get one of them is really not that impressive. Now, sorry?
At least it got it right.
Well, so JT, you're welcome to come debate. So if you're going to say orthodoxy is a cult, I don't know why I would have okayed your comment there, JT. So you want to give evidence that orthodoxy is a cult, you're welcome to present that argument. You can have the floor. Don't ban JT's comments. So he says that orthodoxy operates like a cult from what I've seen. And they're arrogant. Well, not everybody who says that they're orthodox is orthodox. Anybody can make a profile and act like an idiot. So there's teenagers that make Twitter profiles. So what, dude? Grow up. Come on, man. If you want to act like an adult and actually debate the issue, you're welcome to. But just saying that orthodox are arrogant and they act like a cult isn't really an argument.
Toss a penny, you've got a chance of getting it right 50% of the time. Design is dead, otherwise one must explain who designed the designer. Well, we skate over a lot when we say design is dead. I think probably John and I would agree that life is explained. Darwin explains life, and no serious.
Yeah, but it doesn't explain anything except a process. So explain can be referring to different things. I might use the word explain to describe how a thing is, but explain can't really explain what a thing is unless we go into the domain of metaphysics. But of course, Richard doesn't want to go there because that will be totally self-destructive and undermining his own position. Explain how things are, what life is, might refer to epistemology. And of course, Richard will not want to go there either because that will not be a domain that he would be able to last very long in. So by explain, the naturalistic reductionist worldview always just means the causal process. But that's not actually an explanation. That's just a series of events. Can't give you normativity, can't give you truth value, can't give you meaningful content, can't give you anything other than this, then this, then this. But that itself actually doesn't even work, given the fact that to be able to say this event, then this event, then this event, presupposes the ability of a knower to categorize and recognize meaningful patterns, which Richard already said in his book, we have no reason to believe that our conceptual schemes, since they are human constructs, are actually meaningful at all or tell us anything at all, you see. So this debate was over once Lennox basically called him out on that from his own book. Dawkins doesn't even seem to have caught any of the arguments that they basically just all whizzed over his, fluffy bald head.
Scientist doubts that. So we go back to the previous, a rather more difficult stage in the understanding of where we come from, which is the origin of the universe itself. And that really is genuinely difficult. We don't know. We understand essentially biology, we don't understand cosmology. In a sense, we could say cosmology.
We now know. He loves the "we now know" fallacy. He's like the king of that. We now know. Like, so apparently, it's sort of like Anthony Fauci. Don't question me. I'm science. I am science. Right? Dawkins sees himself as I am science. I am science. I am the voice of science. The voice of Sauron.
John mentioned in the answer to the previous question the idea of the physical constants being finely tuned. And it's quite true that many scientists, many physicists maintain that the physical constants, the half dozen or so numbers that physicists have to simply assume in order to derive the rest of their understanding, just have to be assumed. You can't provide a rationale for why those numbers are there. And physicists have calculated that if any of these numbers was a little bit different, the universe as we know it.
Now, I wouldn't start my argument with this kind of a dude with fine-tuning. Did John Lennox make a fine-tuning argument? I missed that. Maybe he's referring to a book or something. But I'm interested to see how Dawkins is going to reply to this. Again, I wouldn't make this argument. It's not that you can't make this kind of an argument. It's that there's prior considerations to this kind of an argument. But let's see how Dawkins responds to the fine-tuning, because my guess is gonna be that he's just gonna say it just is that way, right? So, and if you don't challenge the presuppositions, that's another reason why I wouldn't jump to fine-tuning. It's not that you can't talk about fine-tuning, but an atheist is gonna say, well, it's just that way. I mean, maybe it just is that way. But how do you know that fine-tuning necessitates a single creator, personal God, right? That's the thing that's assumed in the argument. So you might as well just question the presuppositions from the outset, which, to be fair, Lennox kind of did do that. Like, he kind of multiple times hinted at these really devastating problems in Dawkins's worldview. So we'll give him points for that.
Wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be here. The universe would perhaps have fizzled out in the first yoctosecond, and so we wouldn't be here, or other things would have gone wrong. It's tempting, once again, to import the easy, facile idea of a designer and to say that the designer twiddled the knobs of the universe at the Big Bang and got them exactly right, got the gravitational constant right, got the strong force right, the weak force right, and so on. But it seems to me to be manifestly obvious that that is a futile kind of explanation, because, as the quotation says, who designed the designer? You have explained precisely nothing, because instead of just saying, oh, well, the knobs were tuned to the right values anyway, you say, oh, there was a God who knew how to tune the knobs to the right values. And if you're going to postulate that, then you've, in a sense, sold the pass. Some physicists solve that problem by not invoking God, of course, but by invoking the anthropic principle, saying, well, here we are, we exist, we have to be in the kind of universe in which is capable of giving rise to us. That in itself, I think, is unsatisfying, and as John Lennox rightly says, some physicists solve that by the multiverse idea, the idea that our universe is just one of many universes. There's a sort of foaming bubble, a bubbling foam of universes.
bubbling foam of universes, the quantum foam. It's sort of the bubbling foam atop the Colt 45 that Lando Calrissian sells everybody in the 1970s.
Colt 45, it works every time. The quantum foam of the Colt 45 multiverse. This sounded funny the way he was talking about the bubbling sort of foam. What are you talking about? This is such sci-fi fantasy, right? The quantum foam. Give me a break, dude.
The bubble in which we are is only one of billions of universes. And
I know he's just talking about different theories, but like the stuff atheists believe, dude, it's beyond. The theology of Christianity is so reserved in what it claims and says compared to the Marvel universe, soy universe of quantum foam multiverse. It's just so ridiculous. I mean, these people believe the stupidest stuff, right? Total fantasy land. They believe literally that the universe is the Marvel universe, right? The scientism crowd. And that's rational. But Christianity is the equivalent of flying spaghetti monster. I mean, it's like, dude, you believe Marvel level stuff. Get out of here.
each of these universes has different fundamental constants. Most of them have fundamental constants which are unsuited to give rise to the sort of permanence and the sort of chemistry.
Is he really appealing to multiverse theory and the idea that the millions of multiverses that are out there actually don't have a universal constant? Oh my gosh, dude. People will believe anything but the truth, right? I mean, doesn't this just demonstrate the truth of Christianity? That people will latch on to the stupidest Dungeons and Dragons LARPing Marvel soy universe beliefs, except the one that is the obvious explanation, right? I mean, I'm kind of baffled that that's actually what he just argued. Did I hear this right? Am I lost in my own jokes? Did he just say that the multiverse shows that most of the universes don't have a fine-tuned constant? He appealed to the quantum foam. Wow.
The sort of conditions that gives biological evolution, Darwinian evolution, the chance to get going.
If you want to see the refutations of multiverse, I've done multiple videos on how dumb this is. Quantum foam, baloney. Dude, come on. This is way beyond theism, man. Quantum foam, it's total contradictory, gibberish nonsense. It's metaphysics for soy boys. That's what this is.
The minority of those universes has what it takes to give rise to Darwinian evolution.
All right, this is the dumbest argument I've ever heard anyone get. This is the level of Matt Dillahunty's monkey have value because ancestor monkey have value. I mean, this is like that level. I'm done with this, dude. I can't. That dude is next level. I mean, we were making fun of quantum foam back when we were doing Hoax Busters. Do you remember the guy? I'm not joking. There was a guy who argued that the Big 9 event. I'm not joking. Look this up. This is how stupid this stuff is. There was a dude that wrote an article. I think it was on like Huffington Post or something. Just garbage website. And the guy was arguing that quantum foam shows that you can affect the past from the future. And that because people, I'm not joking. Somebody needs to find this article. This is illustrative of what little Dickie's arguing here. Because people in the present day are questioning the Big 9 event, they are retroactively causing the Big 9 event to have been a conspiracy. I'm not joking. That's what the people that argue quantum foam, that's the stuff they argue. So here's Richard going to quantum foam multiverse. Absolutely no empirical evidence for this. It is pure speculative sci-fi soy stuff. And that's his retort to fine-tuning? Dude. I mean, that is comical. How does anybody believe this stuff, man? I mean, like, I think we're at the point where you want to just make fun of everything, but it's so ridiculous that you can't even make fun of stuff because the satire is all real now, right? I mean, these are the people who championed going against metaphysics And now they're literally interjecting Marvel Soyverse stuff as if that's science. They're saying Marvel soy stuff is science. Okay? That's where we are now. And this dude is the mouth of science, spouting like Marvel fanboy fiction. Unbelievable. All right, I can't take any more of that. I'm done with him. That was Dillahunty level stuff there. That was top 2. We've done, this is about our 10th debate review. Everybody, if you haven't had a chance, hopefully you've enjoyed the Quantum Funko Pop universe. Yes, we're in the Quantum Funko Foam Pop universe. And we've done how many streams making fun of this stupid worldview? I don't know, right? It's just total irrationality and nonsense. It literally is. I mean, the law of identity is not the case. As they try to say, you are you in a million different universes where you're not you. Okay, you have to have a law of identity to say stuff like that. And the multiverse theory fundamentally denies the law of identity. That wouldn't be you. It's just, it's like pure made up nonsense. All based on science, right? And so it really is, I think it really is true that when you are in delusion, you will believe anything. You will believe the dumbest stuff. So that was the lesson for tonight. So if you haven't seen this about the 10th one, so we started this off with the Bonson-Stein review, like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. That was our first one. That was a lot of fun. You can find that on YouTube. We did the Bonson-Tabash. That's only for members of my website. We did William Lane Craig, 3 of those. We did Peterson, 3 of those, right? We've had a lot of fun. These are always enjoyable. I get to do a lot of impressions, act like a goober, act a fool. But hey, it was worth it with Diet Soda Light with that big fat super chat, $333 to kick off the show. Thank you so much for that. Tom Coombs Chuckle, $10. Tom Coombs Chuckle says, is there any chance that Riley Wagman, I don't know who Riley Wagman is, and Edward Slavsquat will come on? Don't know who they are, but they sound like interesting names. He seems to know about the situation in Russia regarding rollout of Utopia. I don't know what that means. You mean, I'm assuming you mean what's happening in Ukraine. May I also request Candy Ibarra impression? Well, Jay, if you're not going to deal with the evidence, how are we going to do a debate? That's my Ibarra. Since you gave $10, there's my Ibarra impression. And you said he has such a soft and gentle voice. Well, doesn't he, though? He's a very soft, expansive fellow. Well, Emmanuel, $5. Without trying to suggest what or how you do stuff, it would be relevant for you to consider dumbing down in order to reach a larger audience. I mean, I've done how many videos, 10-minute encapsulations, top 10s. And when I do the top 10s or the dumbed down videos, they don't get any more views than the long, non-dumbed down videos. So I don't really see the point. If I was doing dumbed down 10-minute videos that got 100,000 views, 500,000 views, it might be worth it. But the 10-minute videos literally get the exact same stats as the 3-hour videos. So I don't see the point. But thank you for that suggestion, Evan Schultz. You can find, no, who's he? Well, Emmanuel made that suggestion. You can find multiple, I mean, I did a top 10 reasons I'm not a Protestant, top 10 reasons I'm not atheist, top 10 reasons I'm not Catholic, top 10 things with Orthodoxy. I did all those, experimenting with that, and some of them did pretty good, 40, 50,000. But I mean, the 3-hour debate reviews, they get 20, 30,000 views too. So, over time. So the other thing too is that boiled down brief videos, that I don't make any money from that. I mean, I make a living with super chats. So people pay me money when I come on here and act the fool. When I be your dancing monkey, I get money. When I do a 10-minute video summarizing things, I don't make any money from that. So It's just not financially viable to make these high quality produced 10-minute videos that take 5 hours to clip crap in and process, and they don't make any money. Evan Schultz, $10. Thank you. Can you do Mark Zuckerberg? I love that.
Yes, Evan, I can. I'm so happy that we're going to have so much time in the Kumaverse. In the Kumaverse, you can be whoever you want. You can make love to a dragon.
How's that? Booger, $5. That's a nice name. I'm a fellow Southerner. I'm from Alabama. What is your view on, come on, bro. You know, we can't talk about that on this. Guys, I'm sorry. I'm not going to read your super chat if you try to ask the edgelord questions. So I'm sorry I can't read that, Booker, but thank you for your $5. Bryson Hicks, 420. I was born in a goofy Protestant sect. Therefore, I determined through logical deduction that we only exist to send you super chats. That is 100% a logical, necessary conclusion. Thank you. You get it. Booger again for $10. He says, no, sorry, bro. Come on. You know you can't bring that up. Are you just trying to get me banned? There he goes again. So, Booger, I'm sorry, dude. Can we just ban Booger because he's intentionally... Yeah, I know he's sending super chats, but next time Booger says something, just ban that dude. Not going to read any of those. Bryson Hicks, $10. On a serious note, thank you for helping slow boys to be smart. That is an interesting way to characterize what we do. Do you have any book recommendations on the early church and councils? I mean, you could read the Jaroslav Pelikan series. I've done lectures on that, so I would say go read Christianity and the Catholic Tradition by Jaroslav Pelikan, Volume 1. I'm not going to read any of those. Son of Tiamat, $5. The easiest way to point out flaws in atheist thinking is to point to predictive validity. Okay? Most scientific fields won't have predictive power above 50%. Okay? However, they think that they can accurately interpret the world going back millions of years. Yeah, I think there's probably an interesting line of argumentation that you could do going down that route. But right now, what we're going to do, the part we all love, is where we open it up to the haters and debaters. Opening it up to the haters and debaters. Come body me. Come floor me. Come put some bodies on the floor. Put the bodies on the floor. You have the floor. Like a janitor on Sunday, you can have the floor. Mop me on that floor. Please, you have the floor. Anybody that is in the Twitter spaces, all you have to do is request to speak. I will give you the microphone. Right now, it looks like we got a nice little cozy, intimate group. Nobody wants to speak. Maybe nobody wants to debate. Hey, it's okay. You can ask questions. You don't have to debate. You can leave a nice comment. You can give some friendly advice. You can body me in a debate. All you have to do is hit the request button. When you come on, you will be muted. It does that. Just unmute yourself. Uh-oh. Here's a request. Here come the requests. Let's see. First up, we got Fumples. What's up, Fumples? I know Fumples isn't one to debate, but that's okay. What you doing, Fumples?
Oh my goodness, I'm here. I'm the first guy. Oh, this is amazing.
What's up, Fumples?
Happening, Jay?
What's up?
Jay.
Yeah, you're on. You're on. Your Lucky Charms they're warmed up today. You ate your Lucky Charms this morning. You're on. What you have to say?
Jay, I'm thinking about becoming a monk. What do you think of that?
That is a decision that you make with your spiritual father. So if you guys have talked about that, that's what you want to do.
The next time I'm going to be speaking to him is like in a month. So.
Have you talked to him about this at all?
I have. He told me, he recommended me a monastery down in Essex that was established by Saint Sophrony.
Cool. Awesome.
I'm thinking about heading down to England and joining it with my friend Luke, who's also interested in becoming a monk. So if we do that, we're going to come back to Northern Ireland and start building monasteries.
Oh, wow. That'd be awesome. Well, may God bless you in your endeavor. So hopefully your spiritual father can give you some good advice in that domain.
Yeah, well, that is if that happens, though. I'm not entirely certain if I want to do that, but I really feel an inclination towards doing that.
Okay. Well, good, man. I hope it works out. Anything else?
Did you read my super chat? Because I was listening. I just jumped on recently, and I asked you a question about Enoch and Elijah being in heaven before everyone else. Did you read that out, or did I miss it?
No, I haven't got there yet. I went through some of the super chats, and then I wanted to open it up to haters and debaters.
All right. Okay. Well, I'll just say my question now then. Whenever Christ descended into Hades, he supposedly brought everyone back out, and everyone who repented, and among them was Plato, actually, but I'm not going to talk about that. How did Elijah and possibly Enoch, because it says God took him, how did they get into heaven before everyone else?
Right. So I think a lot of people speculate that they are in paradise, so they're not in heaven of heavens, right? So they didn't die, and that's why the apocalypse says that when Enoch and Elijah come back, then they die.
Right.
But
right.
I mean,
that makes more sense,
I don't know if that's a speculation. I don't know.
That actually makes a lot more sense. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, man. And remember, if somebody else wanted to speak and then they left. So we got a lot of timid people today. Not Fumples, he's not timid, but we got timid people over there. We got a full house over here on Twitter Spaces. I can't tell how many people it is. Maybe 50, 60 people. And if you want to hop on, hit the request to speak button. You can body me in a debate. You can floor me. You can mop the floor. This is the chance. All of the haters that want to debate so bad, they're all debate me. We open it up all the time. Anybody could hop on here and do it, as long as it's on the topic. You can have the floor. Make whatever arguments you want. Here they are. Next up is Lucky. Lucky, what's up, Lucky? Lucky, unmute. You got the floor. Gotta hit unmute, bro.
All right, unmuted. How you going?
Hey, what's up, Lucky? How you doing?
I'm good. So my background is I'm sort of inquiring into the church. I've been going to church, the Orthodox Church, for about a year. I go every week.
Uh-huh.
I'm praying. I'm doing all the sorts of things that I can. I'm coming from a strong atheist background, so it's a very big transition for me. I say that just so that you know that I mean my question in good faith.
Okay.
So I was listening to one of your episodes recently, and it was really interesting. It was one of your callers got on the topic of determinism and knowledge, and so let's see if I can ask this question in a way that makes sense, because it's going to be a bit hard for me to sort of articulate what I'm asking. But if I can paraphrase your position, and then I'll get to my question and see if you can help me out. So basically what you said is that determinism implies that there's no knowledge, because in a deterministic system, you could not know whether or not you were determined to believe the truth or a lie. So
that would
but I think that's accurate.
That would remove the possibility of either truth or falsehood.
Yeah, because it's just everything's like you can't be outside the system to know what's true or false. You're just in it. You're just programmed to have view X or not X, and there's nothing else to say about that.
Yeah, and there's no way to delineate which is correct and which is preferable. It just is correct.
So my question is this. Let me see. Is it possible, and maybe I'm just really slow on this, or I'm just still processing it, but is it possible that, let's say it is the case that the system is deterministic, but it's not coherent to claim it in a linguistic way? Or is it the case that what you've already shown implies that it can't logically be the case at all? So I guess I'm kind of making a distinction between the linguistic act of saying, we know the world is a deterministic state, versus the actual metaphysics of it, if that's a clear question.
How can you divorce those two?
like I said, I'm coming from a strong materialistic background, so maybe
Yeah, but I mean, even if you're a materialist and you divorced the linguistic, conceptual things from reality, it's self-defeating. So that would lead you to the position like Hume or Quine that you can't actually even know there's an external world. That's that's just as devastating to a worldview or to the possibility of knowledge.
I guess what I'm trying to just nail in my head, because I actually agree with you on the first part, and I'm just trying to process it all through. I guess I'm just trying to really just destroy that last lingering part in my head, which is maybe, and I'll probably just restating the same thing, that maybe it is just that the world could be completely deterministic and we couldn't know anything about it, and everything we do is meaningless and valueless, and we're all robots and all that.
Okay, then do you understand that if that's the case, you couldn't make those sentences?
And that's what I'm saying. What if it is the case that we can't make those sentences, or if we do make those sentences,
Then the fact that you're arguing, the fact that you're arguing and saying these things doesn't work. You can't even make a sentence.
I'm kind of arguing about them. I'm not trying to make this direct statement to you, Jay, that this is the case.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I'm asking is it possible that that's the case of things?
It doesn't matter who. It doesn't matter who you're directing the communication to or how you're trying to limit it. There's no meaning in any of those phrases or propositions at all. Language is impossible in that worldview.
So is what you're saying that if language is not possible, therefore everything else must be that implies everything's wrong about what you believe? So I guess is there an assumption there that
if reality is purely a determined chemical process, then the truth values behind the sentences and the phrases that you're saying that you think have meaning have no meaning. That's why it's a fundamentally contradictory position. So when you try to argue for your position being true, you're contradicting the system that you're arguing for, because it says there is no true, there is no false. You can't divorce your linguistic predication about the world from the world, because you're trying to make statements about metaphysical things in the world. You're saying that it's determined. To say the world is purely deterministic is a vast metaphysical claim. And now you're trying to say, but my words don't reply to anything metaphysical. They're just words.
Yeah, I guess what I was asking...
That's self-defeating.
I'll let it go after this, because I probably am just repeating myself. I guess what I'm asking is, what if the world is a deterministic place, but my utterance I just made is completely impossible and incoherent, because the nature of claiming such is impossible, but I guess I'm trying to avoid remove the logical possibility of a deterministic world, because to me it seems like you can't
make sentences. You can't make sentences. You can't make sentences describing your position, because sentences require a certain kind of world.
But just because I can't make sentences to describe my position doesn't mean that the position itself is not.
Yes, possible. It does. Yes, it does, because assumed in explaining your position is that it is objectively the case. You're trying to give a description about a state of affairs in the world, and then you're saying, but my words don't describe anything in the world. So that's a contradictory position.
I think that was good. I think that was really on to answering my question. So thank you.
Sure. Yeah, good question. All right. CG. What's up, CG? You have the floor. How you doing?
Pretty good. So just trying to wrap my head around uncreated energies and specifically with Christ. Mm-hmm. So when people were viewing Christ, they saw Christ even before the Transfiguration, what are they viewing? Are they still just viewing the second person of the Godhead, the divine person, and then at the Transfiguration, are they viewing the uncreated energies? I guess I'm just kind of confused on that, but I've been trying to.
No, I mean that's the Orthodox teaching. That's what the expression of our iconography tells us, right? If you read the Seventh Council, when it talks about iconography, the icons pick out the second hypostasis of the Godhead. So if you don't have the nature-person distinction, you're not going to be able to have a correct or coherent theory of images, icons, and iconography, because St. Theodore of the Studite's book on the Holy Icons points out that the picking out of the second hypostasis of the Trinity is what we are picturing. Because he became incarnate, he can be circumscribed. He's circumscribed because the second person of the Godhead assumed human nature. And so when we portray Christ in icons, we are picking out the second hypostasis, the divine person of the Son, the Logos. And then we're not picturing the divine essence. We're not picturing the divine nature. We're picturing the second person of Godhead. So on the Mount of Transfiguration, what is being demonstrated is that the divine person of the Logos, his uncreated light and glory is manifested and shining through the human nature that he assumed. 1 Timothy 6 says, God alone dwells in immortal light. That's the immortal, uncreated light that is manifesting on the Mount of Transfiguration, Matthew 17. And who believes that God's light is created? Well, the heretics and the Roman Catholics, who are heretics, believe that God's light is created because they don't believe in the essence-inner distinction. They don't understand that it's all through the scriptures that it's an energetic manifestation. So the answer is yes, it's the divine person that people are seeing. And because he's a divine person, he manifests divine uncreated energies. And that's what the Transfiguration is. If the Transfiguration is a created light, how is it showing his divinity? The whole purpose of Transfiguration is showing he's divine.
Cool. That's great. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Yeah. Good questions.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So let's see here. Next up is Jack. What's up, Jack? How you doing? Just hit unmute. It automatically mutes for whatever reason.
Hi, Jake. How's it going?
What's up?
I'm
Good.
a big fan
How you doing, Jack?
of yours. I just want to say today I already hopped in my coon pod and intravenously injected myself with bug juice.
Well, I don't know why you got out.
do
You
my
need to get
part
back
be a
in there.
future citizen.
Yeah, well, if you're a good global citizen, you would get back in your coon pod. What are you doing out of it?
I'm sorry. I promise I'll go back in as soon as I'm done. My question is, Jay, if God is real, why did my mum leave my dad for Eric Ibarra?
Because of his mojo and sexual prowess, obviously. So
I understand. That's
yeah.
yeah.
I know that's kind of hard
Well,
for
my
you.
actual question,
It's
Jay,
hard for
would
you to
be,
accept, but yeah.
I mean, the reason why materialism, as far as I can understand, is not, a tenable position is because, Bertrand Russell thought he had it right. He said, we've discovered atoms and then that's it. We worship the atom now. But obviously now it goes deeper than that into it's just irreducibly complex. We don't know. What would be the orthodox view of material reality? What constitutes this? Obviously we're spiritual as well. But is there any kind of biblical answer as to what material reality is made up of that, doesn't devolve into crazy,
well, I think that, obviously
kind of stuff.
Obviously there's body or bodily reality, which is extended in space and time. There's also immaterial reality like the mind or the soul, which is not extended in space and time, but does it have a real existence? So there's two different types of created things, immaterial and material things. When it comes to material bodies, exactly what they are, whether they are atoms or with negative space between them or some form of energy, ultimately, doesn't really matter because it's still created. So I don't think that we're committed to some view of physics because necessarily we believe in physicality. Physicality could be explained by different models of physics. So, yeah, that's what we mean by physicality. There's nothing wrong with physicality, right? Jesus' body was physical. He showed Thomas, the piercing in the side. Put your finger in here. It's the same physical body that he had. What exactly physicality is in a physics sense, I think we can have different models for that.
Do you think it's possible that one day we'd be able to conclusively prove that? Come to a conclusion, or is that kind of one of just a mystery that we can never kind of conclusively settle on?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
I've stumped you. All right.
I get stumped all the
Thanks for
time. I mean,
answering.
I don't know.
Cheers.
There's a lot. As you get older, the more you realize what you don't know. So, will we solve the mysteries of physics before the end of the world? I don't know. But good questions. Anything else?
Fair enough. Thanks a lot, man.
All right.
Cheers.
Thank you. Good questions. Umar. Umar. I'm sensing that we're gonna hear about 1 and 3. 1, 1, 1 equal 1. How 1, 1, 1 equal? What's up, Umar?
Hi, family, and I just passed away. I come see you guys are discussing something nice, which is also part of my study in the university, which is I studied environmental biology. We studied different part of creation and also this atheism and theism, which is a very nice subject.
Okay,
And,
so you studied biology. What? It's hard to understand what you're saying. What's the point?
can you hear me?
Barely. I heard you say you studied biology, environmental biology. So what's you have a argument?
Yes, I study environmental biology. In this
Right.
study, I come across this topic is different culture creation, atheism and theism, those that believe in God and those that believe there is no God existence. But in my opinion, I always support theism, those that believe in God, because
Hey man, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to be mean. I can't understand what you're saying, man. I'm sorry. Let's see. Let's move on. So I have no idea what you're arguing. I'm not trying to be mean to you. Honestly, just don't understand what you're saying. Next up is Majestic. What's up, Majestic? How you doing? Just hit unmute, Majestic.
Hey, what's up, Jay? Big fan here. So I've actually started getting into Orthodox Christianity because I've listened to you after, looking at Gnosticism and all that kind of crap. But
Okay.
One thing that kind of sticks out to me is something that's sort of like, I studied like physics and stuff, so I have a lot of quote unquote scientific friends. A lot of the gotchas they throw at you with the Bible is they'll point to stuff like in Deuteronomy or Leviticus, like the mixing of like threads that's forbidden to wear, or like the whole part in Deuteronomy about like marriage violations and what happens if a woman's virginity is like false and all that stuff. And they sort of just kind of point to that and be like, well, what's the sense of that? Like, what is God trying to do there? And I always feel like, I don't know. I don't know how to respond to that. I'm just kind of curious. What do you think about those passages and their applicability to today and today's?
Well, they're explained in the New Testament. So Paul in the letter to the Corinthians explains that they have a spiritual typological significance. So crucial to interpreting the Bible is typology. And so he says in the Corinthians in like chapter 6 and 7, right around in there, that the purpose of the not sowing two seeds in a field or sewing two different cloths on the same garment was supposed to teach the principle that evil and good don't mix. You can't mix vice and virtue. And so not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers, he says, was the spiritual principle behind those ceremonial and Mosaic commands that related to the land and to that kind of stuff. So they do have an application, but they also had a temporal fulfillment or significance that's no longer necessary for today. So if the purpose of those laws was to prepare for when the Messianic age comes, if now the Messiah has come, it's not that we in no sense keep those laws, but the keeping of those laws is done in a spiritual way now because they reach their apogee, their fulfillment. So does that help? Does that make sense? And then the situation of the woman that drinks and so forth to see if she has cheated or whatever, that has typological significance to the Eucharist. So the Eucharist is the fulfillment of those eating and drinking ceremonies, covenant rituals in the Old Testament, all of them. So most people are probably familiar with the idea of Pascha, right? The Passover. And if you've read the Gospel of John, then pretty clearly the Gospel of John makes reference to Jesus being the Passover. Okay, but Jesus is also the fulfillment of the sanctuary cities in the Old Testament, where you could run and find haven from the avenger of blood. Okay, that's an analogy to Satan and our sins and finding redemption in Christ in the church. right?
Okay.
Jesus is the fulfillment of the ceremony there of drinking the water, the curse. That's why the dust is put into the of the ground is put into it, because that represents the dust of the curse. Out of dust you were made in Genesis, and so it's a ritual by which you could be vindicated or cursed. If you read again the book of Corinthians, Paul says in I think it's 1 Corinthians 11, he says that if you eat unworthily, you can eat unto condemnation and judgment, or you can eat unto blessing. So the Lord's Supper is again the fulfillment of those Old Testament eating and drinking ceremonies as well.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And one last question I had for you was, so first of all, thanks again for saving me from Gnosticism. Now in hindsight, it seems kind of dumb that there would be secret teachings of Jesus, since this kind of goes against like the entire point of saving people. But the one thing that kind of does stick out to me is I've never understood, and forgive me if you said this in your Gnosticism talk.
That's okay.
I've
Go ahead.
listened to most of it, but God the Father versus like, I guess as like they view the monad, which is an androgynous. The only reason that seems somewhat like makes sense to me is because if God is all powerful and can create existence, wouldn't he have to have both the feminine and the masculine body, both like the seeding of creation, both the birthing and also the birthing of it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but we can't read the biological distinctions that are proper to the created order into God. So when we hear of God as Father, it's not a one-to-one correspondence between a biological male father. It's an analogy, it's analogical language and predication. So there's an analogy between the way that a father is our father to the way God is our father, but we don't do a one-to-one correspondence, right? Like, well, everything that's true of a human father must therefore be applicable and true to God the Father, because that would lead us to all kinds of idolatrous ideas, right? This would lead to the way that Greeks thought about Zeus, right? Zeus is this temperamental, drunk dad who's like sleeping around and stuff, right? And that's because they were sort of reading everything that's in the created order back into God. But it's the other way around for Christian theology. What's in the created order is grounded in the divine order, and the divine order sets the parameters for how we interpret the created order. And all idolatry reverses that and reads properties of the created order necessarily into the creator. So not everything that's true of creatures is true of the uncreated, and that's why even though there's an analogy, there's limits. And that's what the idea of analogical predication sets those limits, right? So for example, when we speak of the Father begetting the Son, well, human fathers beget a son through biological sexual relations with a woman.
Right.
And it happens in time. And when the church fathers were giving explanations of John 1 and how the Son is begotten of the Father, he's always in the bosom of the Father, they just point out that these are analogies. The Father is not a temporal cause of the Son. He's the eternal cause of the Son. And he's the eternal cause in such a way that there's no temporal relations, there's no beginning an end to the process of begetting. It's an eternal coming forth. And so that's why you have to understand that it's an analogy to begetting of a son between a human father and human son. So analogies have similarity and dissimilarity at the same time. And idolatry and heretics always stress the similarities to an extreme degree and read the properties of the created back into the uncreated.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Because the Arians said, well, if Jesus is begotten by the Father and fathers beget sons in time, then Jesus had to be begotten in time. You say that's exactly what the Arians did. So it just has to do with how we understand the words that you're talking about. And God is not a father in a univocal sense as human beings are fathers. It's an analogy.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
God the Father doesn't have biological, what's the word I'm looking for? Like he doesn't have two male chromosomes, right?
Right. Yeah.
Is that helpful?
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I just started reading St. Athanasius on the Incarnation, and so I want to thank you for that. I just finished Father Seraphim Rose's Nihilism, and that really did a lot. So I just want to give you a big shout out for that, and thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you like those. And when you get into reading the Cappadocians, they will also help you with a lot of the things that you're talking about, how we predicate of God analogically. Pretty much all the Cappadocians speak about this, how we name God. I would say read the Divine Names by Dionysius, which is a good work. Read the 5 Theological Orations of St. Gregory Nazianzus. Read Basil on the Holy Spirit. Read Gregory of Nyssa's Catechism, Great Catechism. Those are good places to start. They have other longer writings, but if you're starting, I would start with those.
Excellent. All right, thanks a lot, man.
Yep.
Take care.
And letter 234 of Basil. Basil letter 234.
Okay, gotcha.
All right, good question. Great questions, dude. Robert, what's up, dude? You got the floor. Mop me with it.
Oh, hi Jay.
Hey.
So I have a Bible study that I'm conducting with my family, and I have the Orthodox Study Bible that I use since I'm an Orthodox catechumen, and discovering new things on a daily basis. We just got through the Psalms, and came to find that I was behind a chapter most of the entire way, and then and at the conclusion discovered that there was a Psalm 151, and it's been omitted out of many other Bibles. And I know that the Septuagint translation is based off of the Keon Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament.
Koine.
And there's a lot of different
Koine.
Thank
Yep.
you. Can you explain the significance of that? And I also had a question about the Second Ecumenical Council of the Nestorius condemnation.
Well, Nestorius is condemned at the Third Ecumenical Council at Ephesus.
I apologize.
That's okay. So Constantinople II is the confirmation of the Cappadocian view of the Trinity. So that's the second council. The third council is Ephesus, which condemns Nestorius. But yeah, I mean, the reason that there's the Psalm 151 is there is the same reason that there's all those other deuterocanonical books. So the Protestants followed what they thought was the true canon of Scripture, which was the Jewish approximation of their canon, the so-called Masoretic text, which they thought was somehow a one-up on the notion that Roman Catholics had included the deuterocanonical books. So Psalm 151 would be one of those additional deuterocanonical texts, just like the Epistle of Jeremiah, the letter of Baruch, Maccabees, right? So that's why it's in the Orthodox Bible, is because the Septuagint includes the deuterocanonical text.
That makes sense.
The Deuterocanon is what Protestants call the Apocrypha.
And the Apocrypha is a Greek word for something to be omitted, or?
No, it's just the extra books that Protestants thought aren't in the Bible. Now, the word Apocrypha means like wrongly titled or falsely titled. We don't use that term. Right? We call them
that's what I meant to say.
Yeah, we call them deuterocanonical because that's the way a lot of the church fathers classified these documents as secondary canon or wisdom writings, historical writings, right? So Sirach, Judith, Tobit, the Wisdom of Solomon, Psalm 151, Bell and the Dragon, extra section of Daniel. So there's quite a bit more in the Orthodox Bible, and that's because the Septuagint is translating and including the deuterocanonical books, because after Christianity is, after Christ, the rabbinical schools start to cut out anything that Christians were using. So the Christians are using deuterocanonical texts because there's so many places in those that they wanted to try to cut that off. And so for whatever reason, Protestants thought that in order to X out a lot of Catholic theology, which, for example, there's prayers for the dead in the Maccabees, there's the necessity of good works in, those deuterocanonical wisdom texts. Luther and others said, well, we'll just throw those out. We don't accept those. And thereby, I'm not going to have to accept the Catholic doctrines in those books.
In order for them to make it, is it in order to make it a coherent or quasi-coherent belief system?
No, it's just Luther says stuff like, I don't care if Maccabees says that you can pray for the dead. I don't accept Maccabees.
Right. I mean, but even though it makes it less full, is what I mean to say. And I think that due to the I guess one of the main reasons, to my understanding, for the
Hold on. So there's an idiot in the chat. Deuterocanonical was not invented by Roman Catholics, right? I mean, there's church fathers that used the term secondary canon or secondary list. It's not invented by Roman Catholics. What are you talking about? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, that's totally understandable. And I guess I wanted to lead into my second question, if you can, if there's time. Is there time?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So the Third Ecumenical Council of Ephesus. Ephesus. Thank you. There's an excerpt from the book Two Paths: Orthodoxy and Catholicism, where it discusses Pope Pius the 11th and his encyclical Lux Veritatis, and he writes a plea to the Orthodox churches, and it ends with Father, whose judgment all the fathers of the Synod of Ephesus most dutifully received, and whom they all saluted, with concordant acclamations as, quote, the guardian of the faith. May they all return to us, who have indeed a fatherly affection for them all. I assume that is regarding papal primacy and supreme authority for the papacy of Rome. But I guess my question is, what is the context? Because the author of the book doesn't really explain where the Orthodox admitted that he is the guardian of the faith, and what does that really mean from his perspective, from Pope Pius's perspective in Lux Veritatis?
So the argument of Michael Welton's book is saying that Pius IX is not being honest about what Ephesus says. Pius IX was like the Pope of Vatican I. That was like 100 years ago. So that letter is trying to prove papal supremacy through Ephesus. And Welton and Ubi, many people have pointed out that there's nothing about Ephesus that proves papal supremacy in the Vatican I sense. So I'm confused as to why you're citing Welton when Welton's point is to point out that Pius IX's encyclical is ridiculous.
No, I agree with that. And the reason I'm pointing it out is because I was actually confused because he didn't really elaborate further. I mean, the entire his entire.
Hold on. Welton didn't elaborate, or Pius IX didn't elaborate? That's where I'm lost.
Oh, well, he didn't elaborate on what Pope Pius said, because I know that his intention is to show that Pope Pius was being dishonest about the.
So he doesn't elaborate on Pius IX's reading of Ephesus?
Yeah, his reading of Ephesus which was quoted, but where Pope Pius regards that he writes the Orthodox and says that they had at some point stated that he was the guardian of the faith, which is untrue. Or let's just put it this way: I don't believe that they intended to give him that title in the sense that Pope Pius is trying to state. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean that'd be. I mean every bishop is a guardian of the faith. So even the fact that a phrase "guardian of the faith" is used doesn't equate to Vatican I. I mean, for example, Basil says that Antioch is the head of the body, the head of the church. So no Roman Catholic is going to say, "See, we believe in Antiochian papal supremacy."
That makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad because it confirms the way I was thinking. So, thank you, Jay.
I mean that's my initial answer. I'm not sure which section you're talking about. I'll look at it later. What page is that in Welton?
In Welton, it is page 49. Just middle, page 49 in middle of the page. Yep.
I'll take a look at that, and I know Ubi has done at least 2 videos that cover the statements of the legates at Ephesus. So sometimes Roman Catholic, that's probably what it is, pulling out from the statements of the papal legates at Ephesus. But have you seen Ubi's videos on this? They're pretty good. They go into a lot more detail.
I've never watched them.
Yeah, go to Ubi Petrus, his channel on YouTube, and he deals with a lot of those papal quotes in his videos.
Oh, thank you, Jay.
Sure.
Okay.
Or I should say quote mines. Thank you. Yeah, good questions there. Let's see who's next up. Troy. Troy Broward. What's up, Troy? Proud Brow. What's up, Troy?
Hey, it's going pretty good, man. How about yourself?
Going good. Having a lot of fun. Just yapping it up, talking smack.
Yeah, I was just listening to you at work, man. Good stuff, good stuff. But
Thank you.
yeah, I just had a question on the New Testament ministerial priesthood.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was just wondering from not a historical perspective, because I think it's pretty clear from early church fathers and everything, but more from a biblical exegetical perspective there, how exactly the ministerial priesthood, or we can prove the ministerial priesthood from the New Testament carried over, since, you know, we don't really use the word priest or hierus for presbyter or whatever and all of that. So I was just wondering if you had maybe any good resources or just maybe anything that could point me in the right direction to how to prove New Testament ministerial priesthood.
Well, I mean, the letters of Paul to Timothy clearly show that Paul is passing a spiritual power on to Timothy. Timothy then has the only authority in Ephesus to then lay hands on people after him. You could look at Titus 1, where Paul appoints one person to be in charge of that region there. I think it's Titus 1:5. You could look at the fact that Paul says in Hebrews 13 that we have a right to eat from the altar, by which those who serve at the Jewish tabernacle have no right to eat. So an altar is a sacrifice, and Paul, as a minister and apostle of Christ, has the authority to offer that Eucharistic sacrifice, a la Hebrews 13. And if you look earlier in Hebrews, Paul had made the argument that the priesthood of Christ is one after the order of Melchizedek. So the fact that there is, I mean, the priesthood continues. It's a Melchizedekian priesthood in the New Testament. That's Christ's priesthood. That doesn't negate or make everything egalitarian, because if you combine that with the point that Paul is ordaining a successor in Ephesus, which is Timothy, then we see that the Melchizedekian priesthood also has grades and ranks, just like the gradation that you see in the Levitical priesthood. Levite, priest, high priest. That is mirrored at the local level in the church, and that's why in the Orthodox view, every local Orthodox church has the fullness of Catholicity. There's no super bishop in Rome. Every local bishop corresponds to high priest, and then the presbyter corresponds to priest, and then the deacon corresponds to Levite. So the New Testament is merely mimicking what's in the Old Testament, even to the point of that three grades there, and even to the point of Paul talking about the gift of the Holy Spirit by the laying on of hands. That is in the Old Testament everywhere. It's in Moses. Comes up with Joshua. Comes up with the priesthood, right? And now, yes, in the Old Testament, it's a biological descent with the Levites, but that gets superseded in the New Testament when it becomes a spiritual thing. But even in the Old Testament, it's a spiritual thing, because the promise of the blessing, which is by the laying on of hands of the patriarchs, is also a type of the apostolic succession that Jesus institutes. That's why Jesus says in the Gospels, he who hears you hears me. That's why Jesus breathes on the apostles and says that whoever sins you remit, they are remitted. Whoever sins you retain, they are retained. Okay, that's not in Protestantism. There's no Protestant church that believes that there's a group of people who have an ability to remit and retain sins. So these are all examples taken holistically that show us the ministerial priesthood in the New Testament.
Gotcha. No, that really makes a lot of sense. So then, if Christ being the high priest, as is argued in Hebrews, how are we supposed to think, the relationship between Christ's high priesthood and then the bishop of a church? Like, how are those interrelated? Because obviously we wouldn't say that the bishop is doing away with Christ, or competing against.
Because it's not mutually exclusive, right? The fact that Christ is the high priest in an ultimate sense as the head of the whole church doesn't exclude the fact that the high priest is also a type of the bishop. That's why Jesus says to the apostles, he says that you will sit on 12 thrones with me in the kingdom, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So the apostles are princes of the church. They themselves are also high priests. So would we say that the apostles being high priests and judging the church the way the high priest did, does that detract from Jesus being the high priest? No, Because when Jesus breathes on them and gives them the power of the keys, Matthew 16 and Matthew 18 and John 21, 22, when he gives this power, he's giving a share in his high priesthood. So if the apostles have the power of Christ, the high priest, when they ordain successors, as Paul does in the letters to Timothy, Paul passes on that power to his successor, Timothy.
Gotcha. No, that makes a whole lot of sense. Thanks for that. Is it okay if I ask one more question?
Sure.
Okay, yeah. So obviously, from Trinitarian theology, every action is triadic. But when it comes to creation, we see the second person of the Trinity, the Logos, interacting with the creation, becoming incarnate and acting in his own way.
Mm-hmm.
So how should we think about every action being triadic, but also an individuated action of like a person of the Trinity, as like every person of the Trinity also acting in Christ when he is incarnate, or how
right. This is where the theology of mode comes in to help us. So when we say that every action is triadic, what that means is that the one act is uniquely manifested in a unique way by each person. So the Father has a unique role in that one act to be the source. The Son has a unique role in that one act to manifest what comes from the source. In this case, you're using creation. That's why Paul says creation is through the Logos. So it's from the Father through the Son, and the Spirit has his unique role in perfecting what has been created. So that's why in Genesis 1, the Trinity is present there and mentioned as an action that comes from the Father through the Son and in the Spirit. So Basil's dictum is the same for any action. But when we say that there's one act, it's not a contradiction to say that that one act is uniquely manifested or actualized by each person in their role. So this is where roles come in, or the mode. So the one act is uniquely manifested in a triadic mode. That's not modalism. It's a triadic mode of the one act being manifested. The Father's action is unique to him. It's one action, but the manifestation is unique to him in that it occurs through the Son, and then it's in the Holy Spirit.
Gotcha.
And you'll find that language. You'll find that language in Paul, where Paul talks about pretty consistently the role of the Logos in creation, like in Colossians. All things are from him, through him, in him, right, etc.
Right. Actually, yeah. Thank you for that. And can I actually ask one more question, if that's
Sure.
not too much of a bother? I just remembered that's been kind of in my mind. But the other day you were talking about how the Orthodox Christian position of between Plato and Aristotle, in the sense of like universals, is somewhere in between, in a sense, where we don't locate the universals in some abstract realm, but they're also not just located within the individual himself. So relating to Christ taking on universal man and deifying universal human nature.
Right.
My question is just more where are these universals located in this Orthodox Christian understanding of like the universals? Like how can we think about them? And is there any resources that I could read up on that possibly?
Yeah, read Ambiguum 7 of St. Maximus. Universals are created, but they have an immaterial reality or existence to them. So individuals or particulars have a participatory relationship in universals. So between you and I, there really is a common human nature that we share, but it also is particularized in a unique way by me. So the nature that we share, I have a unique instantiation of human nature as the person J. This is a word in hypostatized. Nature exists in the mode of persons. So that's speaking of the universality of human nature. But there's other types of universals like numbers and whatnot. You could say that they have a kind of universality or a universal type of existence, but they're also creatures. All right. So they're not strictly only creatures in the sense that they are patterned on and created according to the logi, or the pattern of them in the divine mind. So the number 7, there's a number 7 that's in the divine mind from all eternity, and then there's a created number 7 that comes to be on the basis of that logi in the divine mind.
Perfect. Yeah. What did you say?
Ambiguum 7. St. Maximus Ambiguum 7 is the first place to start with the logi.
Perfect. No, that makes a whole lot of sense. Well, thank you very much, Jay.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Good questions. Oh man, now everybody pours in. Don, what's up, Don? John to Don, what's up, dude? Just hit unmute, bro.
Okay, thanks. I've just got two questions.
Okay.
Do you believe in the literal hellfire? And the second question, was Arius right about the oneness of God?
So for us, the fire is the presence of God, and it's the same as the river of life. So there's not a lava pit that's like in the middle of the earth. It's the presence of God himself that torments the wicked, that is at the same time a blessing to the righteous. So no, it's not a created fire. It's the presence of God himself in the Orthodox view. And to the second question, no, of course, Arius was wrong. As an Orthodox Christian, we definitely believe in the teaching of Nicaea and Athanasius.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Sure. All right. Now remember, if you guys want to argue, make a debate, you can. So next up is J, just the letter J, not J-Y. What's up, Jay? Hit unmute. Gotta hit unmute, brah. Do you want to speak? You don't have to. All right. I guess Jay's not going to speak.
Hello, Jay.
Yes, Jay.
Sorry.
It's all right.
Right.
What's up?
So, Psalm 137. Yeah, my question's about Psalm 137, especially the ending of it, with the infants and the rocks. I mean, that seems a wee bit much, Jay.
Well, are you saying that because God has a death penalty for infants at times, that's a bit much? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't want to question God, but I'm just saying, like, what's the justification for that?
Well, I think that we tend to think of everybody being judged on an individual basis. It's not always necessarily the case, but it's also the case that, I mean, everybody's going to die, right? I mean, how many infants drowned in the flood, right? So we're all sentenced to death. We're all going to die. So physical death isn't the worst thing that can happen. And even in the Orthodox view, we believe that God preached the gospel to the dead in the Old Testament. So it's entirely plausible that even those infants could have been, can still be saved.
I'll concede that. That's quite a good point.
Plus, we also don't know, like, what might have been had they not died that kind of death. In other words, they might have lived a worse situation, you know, had they lived. We don't know. But yeah, I don't really, I mean, if we believe that there is death and we're all sentenced to death as a result of Adam's fall, I don't really see the big problem with, like, an infant death.
Yeah, I can't really argue with that.
Anything else?
No, that's me.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, man.
Big fan.
Jonathan. What's up, Jonathan? I'll read a few more of these super chats, too. How you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. You can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Sweet. So I've just been consuming a lot of content recently from Orthodox Shahada. They have some really good stuff on the monarchy of the Father, and I'm kind of asking a question around that line.
Sure.
And I don't know if this is even like Orthodox terminology per se, but how many centers of consciousness would you say are in the Godhead?
I mean, Father Staniloy has no problem using that terminology in his later chapters on Trinity, if what we mean by that is person. If person is a unique way that instantiates, quote, consciousness, then we can say that there's three centers of consciousness. But usually mind is something that we would say is common to all three persons. But all three persons, even if we say that, if what we mean by, quote, consciousness is just mind, the way the Father instantiates mind is a unique way distinct from the way the Son instantiates mind, and likewise for the Spirit.
Okay, interesting.
But sometimes, I mean, the terminology of centers of consciousness is kind of like modern philosophy, so you won't really find that in the Church Fathers. So they will just use like that there's one mind in God, one will in God, one nature in God, uniquely instantiated or inhypostatized in each person.
Yeah, that's a good. That's true. Actually, I've only really heard it from Protestants about centers of consciousness. That's why I was asking. And
well, it may be that when Staniloy uses that towards the end of Orthodox Dogmatics Volume 1, he might be trying to speak to modern Trinitarian theologians and trying to decode what they mean.
Yeah, fair enough. Does it kind of have to do with like there being, I think there's one will in the Godhead, right? Does that kind of play into the... Okay.
Yeah, anything that you say, so according to the Cappadocians, anything you say about the Trinity is either going to apply to all three at once in terms of being a property of nature or essence, or it's going to be a unique hypostatic property that only applies to each distinct person. So, for example, cause. Well, if you mean cause of creation, then all three persons are cause of the created order. But if you mean in the inter-Trinitarian life, cause is not applicable to the Son. That's why the Filioque is not the case for us. Cause is only applicable to the person of the Father.
Awesome.
So it's a hypostatic
that's
property.
Awesome. I have one more.
Yeah.
Sorry?
So it's a hypostatic property. Otherwise, it would be common to all three. So love, for example, is not unique to the Holy Spirit. Love is a property or an attribute of Father, Son, and Spirit. It's a common property.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. I have one other question.
Sure.
I've heard the argument from mainly Protestants, I think it's supposed to be anti-docetic, where they're like, oh, when Christ rose again, when they saw him by the seashore and he told them to bring the boat in, just catching the fish in that I guess he ate with them, so that proves the bodily resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
Where I'm going with that is, I believe it's Genesis 18, where the two angels and Christ are with Abraham,
Mm-hmm.
and he eats there too.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like some pre-incarnation, like mini incarnation, or is there only one official incarnation?
Well, it's that because God transcends the created categories, he's able to appear in a bodily way, even to the patriarchs. So the angel of the Lord is the Logos, and the same thing happens on Mount Sinai. When Moses goes up the mountain, he eats with the Son of Man. So yes, God can do all those things because he's God. It's not like God requires a physical body to do those things. He can appear and wrestle with Jacob before he's even incarnate. But the Church Fathers typically exegete those passages as four significations and foreshadowings of the incarnation.
Oh, okay, good to know. So I guess using the argument that Christ ate at the seashore with the apostles after the resurrection isn't really a good argument for a physical body resurrection.
Well, the Theophanies are physical manifestations, so it is, because Jacob wrestles with the angel, with Jesus.
Right.
So I mean, how you don't wrestle with a spirit? Like Christ can take on physicality prior to taking on a body because he's God. Like he created matter. Why can't he do that?
Okay, fair enough. I never thought of like there being a distinction between physicality and having a body, I guess, but that's interesting perspective.
Well, I mean, again, it's a mystery in the sense that the Theophanies are mysteries, right? How God, the mechanics of how God did it, we don't know. But what we see is, a physicality in the sense that Jacob wrestles with him. I mean, Moses eats with Jesus on the mountain.
Right. Okay.
I mean, part of the argument of the Theophanies is that they are unique divine manifestations in time and space that come and go. And a lot of Roman Catholics, a lot of heretics have a problem with this because they can't see how something uncreated could do that. And this is why in the history of the Orthodox Church, when the debates come up, all the way back to Dionysius, the response is that God is not bound by the limitations of time and space. He created time and space. He's the one that created the laws of time and space, so he can go against them or violate them, so to speak. He's not bound by those. So he can appear as a, cloud and the fire in the desert. He can appear as this one like the Son of Man.
Okay, part of why I'm bringing this up is because I've argued with people before where they say, oh, well, there were many incarnations. So I was like, well, I don't know if I would go that far.
The incarnation refers specifically to taking on human nature. So the fact that he's from Mary.
Oh, that totally clears it up for me. Just the taking on of the assumption of human nature. It doesn't necessarily have to do with the flesh and blood.
Correct.
Even though that is... Okay, that makes a whole lot of sense.
No, I mean, in some way, he's physical, right? I mean, how? I don't know how God does that, but we accept it because that's what the Revelation is saying, is that Jacob is really wrestling with this pre-incarnate Christ.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jay. That's
Sure.
my last question.
Yeah, those are good questions. Next up is Herman BC. So let me read a few super chats, Herman, before we go to you, because we're coming there near the end here. Pano says $5. I'd like to point out that when St. Paisios of Mount Athos was asked 20, 30 years ago about the rapid increase in tech and sci-fi, I'm just kidding, science, he responded by saying, if we repented harder, God would have given us all the advancements by now. Oh, interesting. I didn't know he said that, but yeah, that perfectly illustrates my point. Shout out to our good buddy Pano. Much appreciated. Great comment there. Frankie D for $5. Jay, how not much to say, just throwing a plebe support your way. Much appreciated, dude. Frankie D is a longtime super chat supporter. We love you, Frankie D. Shout out. Lone Slav, $10. I remember 10 years ago watching a debate with John Lennox that had Dawkins, in which John won the debate and the audience, resulting in Dawkins looking like a deflated sack of soy. Thank you for finally reviewing one of the debates. So I guess it wasn't that one. So I don't know. Multiple people said, do this. I didn't realize they had different debates. So I'll have to look down. I'll have to track down the other one, whatever the other one is. Fumples, $5. Jay, I'm wondering what. So yeah, you asked the question about Enoch and Elijah, and I was saying that I think some people, church fathers, think that they didn't die; they went to paradise, which is distinct from the heaven of heavens, right? The third heavens. But that's speculation from the church fathers. But it seems to be reasonable that that's who then comes back in the apocalypse and dies, because they hadn't died yet. Ender, $10. I love these debates, reviews. I've been a fan and have subscribed for many years. Thanks, man. Appreciate that, Ender. Is there any chance of getting a top 10 reasons that Mormonism is not true, or why I'm not a Mormon? God bless and thank you for what you do. I guess I never thought about doing a top 10 reasons why I'm not Mormon. I mean, to me, it's kind of, I mean, if I hinge all of my arguments like I do on Orthodox Trinitarian theology and metaphysics, then you could probably kind of see why I wouldn't accept the Mormon view of God being kind of multiple gods. I mean, they do have a polytheistic view. So, I mean, that's the direction I would go in. It's the same critique I would do of like polytheism. But, yeah, I mean, Mormonism hasn't come up very much. So that's why I haven't really done anything like a top 10 reasons I'm not Mormon. There was going to be a Mormon debate many, many years ago with Justin Hart, who's a pretty prominent Mormon guy. He was going to be Mitt Romney's faith and values guy, and then Romney didn't win. So anyway, but he backed out of the debate. So I prepared for like 2 weeks. I read all his Mormon sources, read Talmage, his systematic theology for the Mormons, and then the dude backed out. So whatever. Bryson Hicks, $5. I like to think that multiverse with giant eagle's wings and singing lead vocals for Leonard Skinner with like an angel band in the front row and I'm hammered drunk. Well, you know what? In the multiverse theory, there is a universe like that. So, blessed journeys to you, and I hope you find your way to that universe, Bryson Hicks. I'm sure that if you soy hard enough, the Marvel multiverse will help you find your way. Your mom, $5. Modern education has wasted my time, making me low IQ. Well, if you just now realize that, then do not fret. Do not despair. So you have woken to level 1. How do I catch up and become well educated by traditional standards? Turn off the TV, stop eating junk food, start to plan time within your day to read good things. Obviously, it's not ultimately about reading, because becoming a cultured, educated individual isn't ultimately what salvation is about, but those are good things. They're good things to have, right? So, you could start learning the church fathers, learning philosophy, learning logic, go do Father Deacon's logic courses, go watch my back catalog. And then, as I said, make time to do those things. But ultimately, it's not really about being educated. It's about, becoming orthodox. So, but you can do all the above. Frankie D, $5. Back with greenbacks and a statement. Richard Dawkins backed down pretty quick when they were discussing Skittles. Oh, you mean pretty recently on Twitter? Yeah, I remember that. This makes no sense from his worldview. Well, I mean, it does and it doesn't, because on one hand, he places his faith in biology, and, biology saying that a male is a male and a female is a female. So in that sense, it makes sense for him to do that. But at the same time, if evolution is true, then anything can transmute into something else, right? So in that sense, I guess it doesn't make sense. How could purely natural beings be on a spectrum in this regard? Yeah, exactly. I mean, on the one hand, it shouldn't be the case. But then again, if anything can mutate into the opposite of itself, then that is the case. Anything's possible. Nix K, $5. Due to sola, orthos make the claim Protestants can't have correct interpretations. But wouldn't Orthodox have the same problem, but one step back? My bad if this is already sent. So we've addressed this objection probably 20 times. You're confusing two different domains. One is the domain of epistemic individual certitude about the text. And ultimately, everybody is in the same boat when it comes to that. On the other hand, though, there's a separate issue which is related to that, which is called normativity. And that's whether anyone can bind a person to an interpretation of the text. So they're two different questions. But we agree with a Protestant and even a Roman Catholic that, yeah, individuals ultimately have to be able to know and understand what the text says. So where we disagree with the Protestant is over the means that the Spirit uses to bring people to the correct interpretation. So we believe that the correct interpretation cannot be divorced from the liturgy, the church fathers, the lives of the saints, the history of the church. All of that goes into how we understand and read the Bible. The Bible doesn't come out of drop from heaven in a vacuum, right? It has a setting, a milieu, which is its proper place. That is the liturgy. So your question is a separate question. So the argument is not Protestants can't interpret the Bible because they don't have an external authority. That's not the argument. I've never made that argument. I've always said that's a bad argument. Two different questions. Toxicolaris, $1. What sort of philosophical argument would you make for marriage being between people that a small brain atheist would understand? Well, I mean, what?
Jay, do you have time for my question?
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, so I was thinking, in the mainstream Christianity, mainly other branches, the purpose of human life is, to bring glory to God, in a general sense. But I've been researching more into the concept of theosis in Orthodoxy. What are your thoughts about that? And is that the true meaning of human life?
Well, I mean, Psalm says God is glorified in his saints.
Okay.
So we partake of divine glory, and God finds that glorious to see us glorified by theosis. So go watch the video that I did with Gospel Simplicity. It's a whole hour talk on what theosis is.
Okay, because like I don't know, it makes more sense that like from the fall, and like actually having God inside of us,
Yeah.
like, throughout life, you want to achieve your full potential.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and the Orthodox view is a participatory metaphysical thing. It's not only that, but the essence of theosis is that we are really participating in an ontological sense in divine life. And that's different from the tendency in Protestantism, which is to stress this disposition that God was mad at us and now he's happy with us. And it's a moral transformation. I was a bad guy, now I'm a nice guy. So, I mean, those elements are there for the Orthodox, but the reason that the disposition of God changes towards us is because we really are participating in God.
Yeah, exactly. Like God seems like an entire different character.
Yeah,
like in
absolutely.
Protestantism and like Orthodoxy.
Absolutely.
It's much more like close.
Yeah.
Close to us,
Oh,
like
totally.
you're actually, coming close to him, and actually like, achieving your full potential with theosis and these kind of things.
Right. Well, that's, I mean, Protestantism is heterodox, so it's missing the very thing that's needed. So, but yeah, good questions.
Like which one?
Sorry, dude. We're gonna have to close it out. I'm sorry. It's almost 4 hours. I didn't mean to cut you off. I thought that was your last question. I don't see any more there. Sorry, Toxicolaris. I don't understand this question. Because what would marriage be? How would marriage be other than people? Do you mean like a man marrying an animal? That wouldn't be marriage. So I don't understand the question. Florida, $5. I was deliberately raised since birth to be a soy boy. I fought against it my whole life. As you imagine, my diet when I was young has lasting effects. Yeah, I mean, I think most people grow up on a bad diet. I mean, me too. I grew up with a pretty bad diet, pretty much ruined my gut. So, I mean, I think we all deal with this in America with a terrible diet, right? I'm on day 2 of taking Tonkat from Chalk. I've noticed changes in my mood, working out, energy. Yeah, the Tonkat really does boost energy. So, I mean, do not take more than, I took 2 or 3 one day, and I was like up all night, like jittery, dude. So do not take that many, because it really does make you uppity. Okay, so, but yeah, I found that to be helpful. But I mean, if you had a long time soy boy diet, definitely transition over to a heavy meat-based diet. That's my take. Elena, $5. Thank you for being awesome. A lot of love to Jamie. Well, she's over there in that other room, and I'm sure she's happy with that comment. I will relay that to her, Elena. Thank you so much. Toxicolaris, he states again, clarifying, marriage between two people. You blocked me 2 years ago on YouTube when I came from JF's YouTube channel. I was talking gibberish. I really needed your guys' help, so I wish you could undo that so I could communicate some way. Yeah, I'm sorry. I do have a quick to block finger, especially if I'm seeing gibberish. So I probably did do that, although I don't recall your name, so I don't remember. But I don't understand what you're asking for. What's a easy, low IQ argument that you could show an atheist that marriage is between two people? Well, I mean, an atheist is just going to say that he'll just redefine the words according to his paradigm. So I don't know that there is an easy argument or definition for an atheist to prove that. That's why you got to go to their presuppositions. Because anything you put before them, they're just going to reinterpret through their atheist lenses into a materialistic, naturalistic paradigm or explanation. So he's just going to say, well, marriage is just a human construct that we made up, and so we can just evolve and redefine it however we want. If somebody 5,000 years ago made up marriage, we can just remake it up into whatever we want. So that's what my assumption is, that that's what an atheist will say. So I wouldn't make an argument trying to prove to an atheist that marriage is somehow between two human beings. But what else would it be? Like marrying a goat? Like a man and a goat? But I mean, if you're an atheist, you could say that, because you could just redefine it to be whatever you want, right? So I wouldn't make that argument. I would make the argument of critiquing the atheist presuppositions, if that's helpful to you. Toxicolaris. Thank you for that. We got one last request. Herman? What's up, Herman? How you doing?
Dude, I was just gonna ask you, can you unban me from your Discord server?
I don't handle the banning and the unbanning, so I have no idea who you are or why you were banned.
Dude, I got banned for some stupid shit a couple of days ago because I was questioning some shit. But could you talk with the mods or some shit?
Maybe.
It seems like a really cool Discord, you know?
Well, then why were you acting dumb?
Yeah,
I don't know what you got. I don't handle any of that. So I mean, what's your handle?
Herman BC02 and hashtag 4380.
Yeah, I'll see about it. I'll ask the mods.
Okay, thanks, man.
Yup.
Really appreciate it. Yeah, see ya.
All right, I think we'll end it there. Thank you guys. Hope we had fun tonight. A lot of fun. And somebody send me the other one. That's if this is not the best Dawkins Lennox debate, then send me the other one. Maybe post it below in the comments if somebody knows where that one is. Everybody have a good night.